Call the September 13th regular Board of Education meeting to order. Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Dan Burdoff. Present. Rich Depry.
Present.
Terry Ellison. Present. Teresa Keene. Present. Nikki Matley is present. Cheryl McGuire. Here. Dylan McGuire. Here. Phil Vosberg.
Here.
Tim Wolf.
Present. All right. We have a quorum and we are in session. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Dan, second by Nikki. By voice vote, all those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Next item is our consent agenda. Any board members wish to remove any consent agenda item for individual consideration? Hearing none, read them into the record. We're approving minutes from the Board of Education meeting of August 23rd, 2021. Approval of support staff resignations, Brenda Engley, Monroe High School cafeteria worker, Austin Bloomer, Public Library library assistant, approval of support staff hiring, Cheryl Knox, Parkside cafeteria worker, approval of professional staff hiring, Mike Flanagan, middle school 8th grade ELA, acceptance of community donations, Set-Off Family Fund, $1,000 to the cross-country program for new uniforms, anonymous sidewalk chalk for the Chalk the Walk at Parkside Elementary, Joanne Babler, $200 to Backpack Buddies, Mary Ann Johnson, $25 to Backpack Buddies, Sandra Martin, $200 to Backpack Buddies, Lillian Falk, $25 to Backpack Buddies, Melvin Haig Memorial, $525 to Backpack Buddies, Monroe Kiwanis, $1,000 to the Backpack Buddies, Monroe United Methodist Church, $200 in Walmart gift cards to each building, Tom Depry, Tim and Marla Pettit, Peggy Mick, and Cindy Linscomb, school supplies to the Parkside Elementary School. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
We've got Teresa with the motion, and was that Terry or Cheryl?
Yes.
Terry with the second. Amazing generosity from our community, and again, we thank everybody who is making donations to the district. By voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, so now we're on to item number 5. So this is our public comment portion. Public comment is a vital part of feedback to the board on matters of public interest, and I've appreciated the civil discourse and respect for public comment at previous meetings. So for this process to work, individuals must be afforded the opportunity to be heard, and I'd ask we continue the established level of civility Monroe has demonstrated as a community and not interrupt individuals while they're speaking or as the meeting continues. Many here tonight may be speaking from a place of strong emotions, and we want to hear and support everyone choosing to make a public comment this evening. So for those of you unfamiliar with public comment, you're making a statement or a speech about your opinion on a topic pertinent to the business that the board is conducting this evening and within the legitimate jurisdiction of the board. And because our board meetings are a meeting held in public, they're not a public meeting, there wouldn't be a dialogue with you about your comment. That means while the board may not respond directly to you during your comment, we will take all of them into consideration as those matters come before the board. A requirement to make public comment this evening is to be a permanent resident inside the school district boundary. We ask that you limit your public comments to 5 minutes and begin with your name for the record. And throughout the meeting, I'm responsible for maintaining order, watching time, and I may make some requests of you during your comment or throughout the meeting. So we have folks that have signed in for public comment. At this time, if you intend to make public comment but you have not signed in, please head back out into the lobby and sign up for public comment. Once we begin, we won't be adding more people to the list. So.
Yes, and when it's your turn to make a public comment, you can come down to the microphone that's on the floor of the auditorium that I'm pointing to. We only have this one on this side, so from wherever you are, if you could just come down to that microphone, and maybe Rich, what we should do is indicate who's up and then who's on deck. Absolutely. So that person can be prepared and maybe even position themselves so that our transitions go faster.
Absolutely. Okay, so first up we have Jennifer Main, and on deck we have Melissa Kuhlmeyer. Sorry, Jennifer.
I have to, okay, it's on.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Moen, and I actually have been students in the school district here for 13 years. I had one that graduated in 2020, and I have a senior this year, and I have a little guy that is in second grade. Unfortunately, a lot of this chaos happened when he was in kindergarten, and we've been dealing with it ever since then. He is autistic. He's had to deal with a lot of things throughout all of this. One of the key things with autism is being able to recognize facial emotions and being able to understand how that person is feeling so that he can understand how to interact in a specific situation. With having all of these masks on everybody, it is hard for him to pick up on any type of social cues, not only with his teachers, but with his peers as well, which is causing even more of a social conflict in his schooling. I was going to come up here and I was going to talk about statistics and data, but I think that we've all been beaten to death with statistics and data. If anybody wants more information on it, I would highly encourage that you check out timetofreeamerica.com. There is a lot of information on that website that they have pulled in from all different areas so that it is much easier to find. I just would like to say to a lot of the parents out there and to the school board to greatly consider not enforcing this mask mandate, especially when you consider that you are right now at this particular time focused on the elementary students. And I don't understand why the main focus would be on the elementary students and not any of the other students, considering that they interact still within the bus and passing each other at various times, not to mention siblings. I just said it myself. I have a second grader with also high school students. You also have people within the district that have kids that go to other schools as well. And these other schools may not require masks. We live in a split household where I have students that go to another school district and to Monroe School District. How does that make any sense whatsoever? Where one school requires it and the other school does not. I guess I want to say that I have put a lot of consideration into this, and this is where I want to reach out more to the parents than anything. If they continue with this mask mandate, I would consider that a lot of you should look into homeschooling because it's a lot simpler than I had thought. And when all of this got put into place in the beginning of 2020, I didn't think that I would ever be able to homeschool my child. But then I realized I can, because I was forced into a situation where I had to. So it's not as bad as you think. And I think that the social damage that you are doing to the children by asking them to wear these masks outweighs the risk of possibly getting an infection, which we already know the rate that they can. Never mind. So the increased problems, even in my high school student alone, she used to be happy and go lucky, and when she did the homeschooling, I could see her getting razzled. I could see all of the things that she had to deal with when she was at home and having to deal with all of this. It's been driving the suicide rate throughout the country through the roof. And I think that that needs to be greatly taken into consideration, especially when we are in a small community like this. It's hard for them to reach out for what they need. But I do encourage that anybody that has the opportunity to homeschool to do so, because I'm going to be upfront and honest. If the mandate does continue, I am going to homeschool my child because I don't know where the line is going to end. So, with that said, I will pass it on to the next one.
Thank you. Okay, Melissa Kohlmeyer, come on up, and Heidi Witt, you're on deck.
Thank you to the board. I apologize, I'm not a public speaker, but this is important enough that I come and overcome my fear and say, I'm here today. I have a son in middle school and I have a daughter at Abe Lincoln. We've open enrolled here as well. We are from South Wayne, originally in the Black Hawk School District. When my older son, who graduated in '97, I started working at the Monroe Clinic, and logistically, it was easier to bring him into Monroe. We've stayed, even though I haven't worked in Monroe in 9 years, because Monroe is an awesome school district. We've had nothing but excellent teachers. The opportunities here are incredible, and I appreciate and have told everybody I appreciate that we can open enroll. I do come to you tonight and say, please, I'm begging you not to make medical decisions for my children. I've talked to my health care provider. He said, do your research. I'm not going to mask my children. You make your decision. I've researched it. There's no significant benefit to these masks. Physically, it's not good. We know that. You've heard all this already about you can get it through your eyes. Masks aren't stopping this. I'm not going to bore you with that. My health care provider said, you make your decisions based on fact. The fact is, I don't want my child breathing. When the mask mandate came down, I was a little blindsided because I was so excited that we had the option. I don't care if anybody else masks their children, that's their business. I'm saying talk to your health care provider and do your research. And mine said, no, absolutely not. The benefit does not outweigh the risk. He said, you won't find a study that says the benefit outweighs the risk for these children with a 99.97% survival rate. We all know this. I won't bore you to go through that again. I think you heard it all at the last board meeting. I'm begging you not to make medical decisions for my child. Let me, my husband, and I discuss it with our health care provider and make our decision. Somebody said, well, my personal opinion, it doesn't matter. This is a health care decision between you and a medical professional. I don't think it should be mandated. A mandate is not a law. I love this school district. I would hate to leave it. If masks are forced, we will have to. I don't know where else to go with it. I'm begging you, please don't make medical decisions for everybody's family. Leave that back with the parents and their health care providers. Thank you for your time. Go Cheesemakers.
Okay, Heidi Witt, you're up, and Mary Lou Dalton, you'll be next.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Heidi Witt. I was born and raised in Monroe. I graduated from Monroe High School, and I graduated from UW-Madison. I returned to Monroe to work for the school district, and I've been a very loyal employee for the past 26 years, and currently serve the district as the District Director of Audiovisual and Print Shop Services. Coming here tonight is a bit out of my comfort zone, but I can assure you that what I say here tonight does not at all impact my loyalty and commitment to my job here at the district and the services I provide for the staff and the community. I am seriously trying to grasp what is happening in our world right now, and I truly can understand why we are in a mental health crisis. I continuously hear that it is okay to not be okay, but I wonder who does that actually apply to? Does it only apply to those who think the same, react the same, do the same, and follow the same? We're being told to follow protocol and guidance that is supposed to be for our health and safety. However, I think it's gone so far that it's no longer about our health and safety, but about control and money. We the people are getting bribed, coerced, and now threatened to follow protocols or mandates that are certainly not constitutional. Only in America can you be bribed to take a shot for a Krispy Kreme donut, a taco, a cream puff, or a $100 Visa card that is most likely paid for by our taxpayer dollars. That doesn't seem to be about health and safety to me. Why don't we teach how to eat healthier? What supplements to take to make our body's immune system work better and protect us better? Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and there are so many more. Why don't we hear about these treatments? Why are these suppressed and censored? Probably not a lot of money in vitamins and cheap but effective drug treatments. There's more money to be made pushing an experimental shot that still has not been fully tested and does not fully protect you from contracting or spreading COVID? And what about the power of natural immunity? Although I do believe that COVID is real, there is something to be said about following the money. Big Pharma is making a lot of money right now with zero liability. Masks. This to me is hypocrisy. When not worn properly, and frankly, even when a mask is worn properly, it will not stop the transmission of a virus. You maybe wear a mask and maybe you don't. You put a mask on and you touch the mask and you talk in the mask and you sneeze and you cough in the mask and you take the mask off and then you put the mask back on, and the cycle repeats itself all day. This cycle is what destroys what you thought you were trying to accomplish. Masks need to be a choice by the individual. It's that simple. When you mandate a mask, what is it for? To mitigate the transmission of the virus? Well, if so, then you just declared it a medical device, which in turn requires informed consent. Again, masks need to be a choice by the individual. I'm a big Badger fan, and I'm pretty sure many people watched the very first football game if they were not there. I was not there, but I was pretty excited when Jump Around began to play. 651 days since we last jumped around. It was pretty awesome to see. But did you notice something else? There was not a mask in sight. 70,000 plus people in the stands, drinking, laughing, screaming, singing all over each other. But yet here we are again, discussing mask mandates on our students and our staff. Should we keep masks optional? Should we have a full mask mandate? It makes no sense to me. You will never get the result you are so desperately trying to achieve. It's just not possible. Keep masks optional for everyone. Don't make personal medical decisions that shouldn't really be made by you, but the individual. And as far as the guidelines for COVID positive and close contacts, it shouldn't matter if you are vaxxed or unvaxxed. If you are a close contact and don't have symptoms, there should be no reason whatsoever to quarantine. Quarantine is a word for those who are actually sick and not for those who aren't. Getting the shot is a personal medical decision and should not have discriminatory consequences because of it. There's no equity in any of that. So I end with this. It's okay to not be okay, right? No matter who you are or how you feel or what you believe, right? Well, tonight I'm telling you that I'm not okay. Please wake up to what is really going on. Thank you for your time.
Okay, before you start, Mary Lou, one last opportunity. If you do intend to make a public comment, please head on out and sign up. So Mary Lou, you're up, and then Ina Fauché, you are on deck. Whenever you're ready, Mary Lou.
Hi. Some of you may know me as Lou Dalton. That's really what I go by. Mary Lou is kind of my legal name. I have been a Monroe resident for over 40 years. I'm a social worker. I've worked as a social worker here in Greene County for probably about 25 to 30 years right now. I'm working as a hospice social worker. So I'm pretty familiar with wearing a mask. The reason why I am here tonight is because of gratitude and reverence for the Monroe School District. I raised two fine young men, and the reason why they are fine young men, not just because of their parents, but because of the dedicated teachers and principals and guidance counselors that they both had. They were my safety net. I don't know what I would have done without Don Sorn, without Jan Keel, without the numerous teachers that we were fortunate enough to have. So I want to say thank you. I also love children. I don't have any grandchildren. I want grandchildren. Who doesn't? But we have to remember a few things here. Kids who are under the age of 12 have no protection except the mask. I am sure that you have read of the numerous stories all across the nation and in southern Wisconsin where hospitalization rates are soaring. This is a danger, and the reason they're soaring is because of COVID. It's pushing those numbers up. Each one of us in this room and everyone that we care about is at risk, at dire risk. Because if my 70-year-old husband gets a heart attack, I don't know that he's going to have the bed that he needs. I have heard stories in Madison, where I work, of a person who fell, had a brain bleed, or could have had a brain bleed, is on warfarin. So the normal protocol is you go to the ER. He was there at 11:30 in the morning. He got a bed at 4:30 the following afternoon. That's not normal. We are facing a crisis here, and it's not a crisis of choice. It's a crisis of life and death. I don't want to wait until there's too many kids that have gotten infected or teachers that have gotten infected, and then guess what? You have to close down the school again. Or you don't want to do that. You want that school to remain open. I am begging you. This is not an exercise in politics. This is an exercise in health. And that's all it should be about. Protecting our children, protecting each other, being the community that we can be, and being the school board that I know you can be. And I thank you for allowing me this time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. One procedural thing we're going to take care of really quick as a board. We have a 15-minute max on public comments, so I just really quickly need a motion and second to continue public comments to like 8 o'clock. That should be plenty of time based on who I've got signed up. So
That's fine.
I'd entertain the motion.
I'd make the motion.
Can you second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Teresa, second by,
Motion
motion by Nikki, second by Teresa. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Am I saying, is it Ina?
Yes.
Okay, Ina, you are up, and Kevin Vassell, you will be on deck whenever you're ready.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak this evening and for all of us to voice our concerns, and it's great that you have this public forum. Really appreciate it. I was born in Monroe, and I went to Abe Lincoln School in the 80s, and I moved away for over 30 years, then just last November, moved back to this wonderful community with my husband and my 2 daughters. And we are so happy that our youngest daughter is now attending Abe Lincoln Elementary School, where I went. Warms my heart to go back there and see what things are the same and what things are different, and how happy the kids look, just like they did when I was there. And we made some specific sacrifices through COVID times. We didn't enroll in the Monroe schools when we first moved here last November. Our children finished out the years online because my husband is immunocompromised due to anti-rejection medication he takes for a past kidney transplant. He is also the sole provider for our family. He works from home, and he will continue to do so, though he has been vaccinated, as I have, and our oldest daughter has. Our youngest daughter is 9, and so currently cannot be vaccinated. So this year, we were happy to see that Monroe schools, all through last year, had been practicing safety and staying on top of the numbers and publishing things and changing their protocol depending on those numbers. Now, we all know with the Delta variant that this is a much more contagious virus, and that indeed younger children are more greatly affected than with the past COVID virus, 19. And so for us, it was a difficult choice once we learned that masking would be optional in the schools. We send our child to school in a mask anyway, and I did write an email to the elementary school principal at Abe Lincoln and told her our specific concerns and that I would be following up with the school board. We were very happy to see that, as you said you would reconsider, and you did reconsider the mask optional for K through 5. This makes us feel a lot better about sending our child to school. Now, we know that breakthrough infections are possible, even amongst the vaccinated. I know people have personally suffered these. This also makes it entirely possible for people to become infected, not realize it, being vaccinated, feeling pretty good, which is hopefully what the vaccination will do for us. It won't keep us from getting it. Hopefully it'll keep us out of the hospital. And so, in their no fault of their own, can easily pass the virus along to others. There are people within the district who cannot be vaccinated. There are people who are not vaccinated by choice. And those people are in our families and in our communities. And when we practice policies that increase the possibility of airborne virus, those of us that have even been vaccinated can then pass it on to the more vulnerable people in our lives and in our learning communities and basic communities. It is a basic human right for our children to be as safe as they can be at their schools. Just as we would not allow for violence, allowing for another child to hit our child, we must also be concerned with the safety of our children and their health, and do what we can to try and prevent as many of these particulates from being in the air as possible. Our children's safety is paramount in our schools. And as a past president of a few nonprofit boards, I'd just like to put something out there that I don't know as board members if you've considered another aspect to what can happen. Surely, if a child becomes infected or a staff member becomes infected and brings that infection home to someone who is quite more vulnerable than they are, and that person dies, it is quite logical that that family might be considering bringing a lawsuit to the school board itself for their damages. Now, it is my understanding
Nina?
that...
Sorry, you're at 5 minutes. Are you
I just
close?
have-
Are you close to wrapping?
Very close.
Okay, go ahead and finish.
So, it is my understanding from my perspective as a former board president that board members individually are liable if a personal breach of duty causes personal injury. If the families whose children bring COVID home, cause the death of a family member, want to bring the lawsuit to the school board, the individual board members could be held liable. I'm not sure what type of insurance, if any, you carry against this, but it could be detrimental to the school board and indeed its individual members. Specifically, directors can be held responsible, personally liable.
Okay, Ina.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
okay,
Thank you for your public comment. Okay. Kevin, you ready? Marcia Simler, you'll be on deck. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Wiesel. At the last board meeting, I said I wanted to speak up in order to keep a promise to my son, who deserves to have a voice here. When I returned home, he and his sisters greeted me at the door with a big hug, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "Thank you, Dad, for doing that." Later that week, 2 girls, probably middle school aged, walked past me on the square, and I don't know who they were, but they apparently recognized me because I overheard them saying, "That guy is on our side." Which makes me wonder, why do our students have any reason to feel that the school board is on a side against them? I think before masks and vaccines became political, it used to be obvious that we should get a parent's consent before even giving kids a Tylenol. But now it's somehow socially acceptable to say kindness is not canceled and to mandate personal health decisions in the same breath. What I'm not here to do is threaten you. I imagine you're sick of threats coming from multiple sides. I see you, I recognize you're real people with real hearts, and we all want what's best for our students. So to that end, I'd like to make a couple important corrections and offer, I think, a helpful suggestion. Mr. Waske, at the last board meeting, you said, quote, "I really don't actually think a mask is dangerous." With all due respect, you guys weren't with my child when he had to breathe through a nebulizer to catch his breath for the first 2 years of his life. And you were not up all night with my other child praying that she would just continue to breathe until morning. Are you guys all aware of the anxiety that an asthmatic child faces when choosing between a potential mask-induced asthma attack or being disciplined by an authority figure? Did you know that these same masks are worn by athletes with the intent of reducing oxygen levels to simulate high elevation conditions? That's called elevation training. Could you imagine strapping one of those on someone else's asthmatic child? But you have. And I don't believe any of you intended to be bullies, but you don't have any place to tell me that a mask can't hurt my child. Is there any possibility that a mask can harm a child, or any possibility that a mask is effective and therefore a medical advice? If there is, then mandating them is definitely bullying, and that in itself is detrimental to a child's mental health. I've heard people say we're just asking for a small sacrifice. A sacrifice is something that someone gives up on their own accord. If I demand a sacrifice, no matter how small, from someone else, I'm a bully. If that sacrifice involves the body and conscience of another person's child, it's not good. Mr. Bartov, at the last board meeting, you said, quote, "Making sure those people who choose not to vaccinate know the risks. There's health risks, whatever, but there's consequences to getting quarantined for 10 days. As a wrestler, it could cost them his postseason. It could cost 3 football games or 2. There's significant consequences, especially in sports. It could cost them a musical play. I think that's why coaches are doing that, right? They're encouraging their students to vaccinate. That's coercion." I think maybe you didn't realize how statements like that can sound like institutionalized bullying. I am concerned that we've already begun to not only bully children, but also normalize bullying to them. Already they've grown to expect to be bullied, harassed, and ratted out by teachers and by students. You can, of course, make policy decisions, as long as those policies don't violate religious or medical rights. Sometimes organizations institute bullying as a policy. Of course, no bully realizes at the time that that's what they're doing. Usually bullies are desperate and doing the best they can, and even bullies deserve compassion. Members of the board, I know you did not intend to bully students, the students of Monroe, but now you know that this policy can cause both intimidation and harm, and now you are aware, and if you continue, it will be with intent. So I ask that this policy be revoked. And I'd like to offer a helpful recommendation. Mr. Waske, at the last board meeting, and I don't want to keep picking on you, I respect you, Mr. Waske. It's just, you mentioned that we only have really 2 levers that we can pull if case numbers go up. I'd suggest there is another lever that we can try that I think maybe no one would oppose. There are affordable air purification systems that use ionization to purify the air of an entire school. This could be installed in every school building fairly easily. iWave Air is the name of one of these systems. Check it out, price it out. This would eliminate more airborne virus than masks ever could. So we have an anti-bullying policy. Let's keep that policy. So if we need a lever to pull, I ask you to consider something like a common sense solution like iWave Air that can scrub viruses from our school without bullying our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So Marcia, you're up next. And after that, we have Deb Kratinger on deck. Whenever
Thank you
you're ready.
so much. Oh, thank you so much, Board. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out. I'm a certified natural health practitioner, and I've been doing it for 30 years. I wrote for health magazines, and there's many books written about me. I got people over cancer, even some pharmacists and doctors come to see me. So I was wondering why, if you weigh the benefits of the mask or not having the mask, and I think everybody should have their own opinion of what they want, that's fine. Is it really necessary? Have you done the research? Because wearing a mask all day, you can get headaches, dizziness, and carbon dioxide toxicity, because you're not getting all the air back out. And it's getting fungus in different kids' lungs. And another thing, I think you should just check and see, like when they have masks again at the hospital, they have extra oxygen into that room. And when the children can't get the carbon dioxide out, it's like poisoning their system. So what does it do? It drops the level of oxygen in your blood and in your brain. So the kids aren't quite up to par like they're supposed to be. And I think that's a really big suggestion that we should really look into. There's a gentleman that did a test on like canaries in a mine or something like that. He would wear a mask, and then he would put your oxygen level should be at 100 when you do an occiput. I don't know if you know about that. And his alarm went off within 7 seconds of having this mask on, a regular mask. I also got some extra masks for the kids because I have 2 boys that went through the Monroe school and loved it, and now I'm raising 2 grandchildren because their mother took off, and we're trying to do them all healthy. Why not, like we have, give them vitamin C, vitamin D3, zinc, there's quercetin that we sell, and then if they do get the virus, we recommend olive leaf or the BSC. I use purification for oils, and there's other teachers that do come to me from your district that also get oils and different essentials for their kids. And you can see how many days our kids or grandchildren are not absent because of it. When kids get together first week or two of school, it's all going to spike because they're all getting together and sneezing on each other. And now you're going like, oh my God, we got to have this mandate, which is not really a law if you look at it. I think it should be individualized to tell the people if they want to have their kids with a mask and the kids agree, then go ahead. But the ones that don't need it or want it, I had a little grandson turn 8, and last year at school, he couldn't get his breath for a while, and so he asked the teacher, and the teacher said, there's already somebody in the corner, you can't do that right now. And he almost got sick, and I just don't feel that's correct for anybody, and I don't think you would have your kids or your grandkids going through that also. So again, why not use purification or oils, or educate the kids on what God put out there? Why drug it up or cut it out? There's 87% of the people that are in the hospital are because of the vaccinated people, and they have comorbid conditions, and they have the problems, not the ones that are healthy. The sick people get the ones that get sick. There's a previous CDC, Dr. Robert Redfield. He said it's a national virus, is a man-made engineered bioweapon. Check it out. It's, you can decide yes or no, but don't listen to the CNN. They're telling you all fake news, but they want it hidden with this pandemic that's going on. Why are people listening to the fake news? My granddaughter's half-sister in Albany does not wear masks at all. She says, are you kidding me? Riley has to go back and wear masks? And I said, I know all the surrounding schools last year did not have to, and we almost went to the Judah school. So a mandate, again, is not a law. And one of the information I kind of looked at up and beyond what I normally teach for health reasons all over the world is that, yes, bacteria and viruses are microscopic microbes, but they differ greatly. Bacteria are a living cell, while a virus is a particle that requires a host cell to replicate. A coronavirus particle averages 125 nanometers, compared to bacteria is 1,000 nanometer size. So you're checking to use a mask that it can go through anyway, because it's like comparing a pinpoint to a watermelon.
Marcia, we're at time. I'll let you go a little
Okay.
over as well. Thank you for your public comment.
Okay,
Thank you.
so a mask can help bacteria, but not a virus.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Deb, you are up next, and after that, we have Emily Zarling on deck.
Good
Okay.
evening, and thank you again for this opportunity I am Deb Kratiger. I am a graduate of Monroe High School. My two sons are graduates of Monroe High School. I am prouder than you can imagine of what our district has, what I've graduated here, and they have also. So I thank you for your service. This is the third time I have spoken to you folks about the mask issue. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it. I do not have children in this school district, but I have grandchildren, and I have a love of the children of this community and this country, and it is our obligation as the adults to protect these kids. It's a myth that masks prevent viruses from spreading. The overall evidence is clear. Standard cloth and surgical masks offer next to no protection against virus-sized particles or small aerosols. The size of a virus particle is much too small to be stopped by a surgical mask, cloth, or bandana. A single virion of SARS-CoV-2 is about 60 to 140 nanometers. I know we talked about not to get into statistics, but I'm going to present to you statistics and facts because we seem to have stopped looking at them. That is about 60 to 140 nanometers or 0.1 microns. The pore size in a surgical mask is 200 to 1,000 times that size. Consider that the CDC website states, and I quote, "Surgical masks do not catch all harmful particles in smoke," and that the size of smoke particles in a wildfire are 0.5 microns, which is 5 times the size of a SARS-CoV-2 virus. Wearing a mask to prevent catching SARS-CoV-2 or a similarly sized influenza is like throwing sand at a chain-link fence. It doesn't work. There has been one large randomized controlled trial that specifically examines whether masks protect their wearers from the coronavirus. The study found mask wearing did not, and I quote again, did not reduce at conventional levels of statistical significance the incidence of SARS-CoV-2 infection. There have been hundreds of mass studies related to influenza transmission done over several decades. It is a well-established fact that masks do not stop viruses. Part of that evidence shows that cloth face masks actually increase influenza-linked illness. Bacteria are 50 times larger than virus particles. As such, virus particles can enter through the mask pores, yet bacteria remain trapped in the mask, resulting in the mask wearer continually exposed to the bacteria. Mandating the use of face masks are not only unwillingly ignoring established science, but are engaging in what amounts to a whole school clinical experimental trial. This conclusion is reached by the fact that face masks used in COVID-19 incidents are being reported in scientific opinion pieces promoted by the CDC and others. The fact is, after reviewing all the studies worldwide, the CDC found, and I quote again, no reduction in viral transmission with the use of face masks. Additionally, children have been repeatedly shown not to be drivers of this contagion. It is well accepted that children have a statistically 0 chance of dying from COVID. So the CDC shows that the K through 12 mortality rate from or with COVID is 0.00004. That's 4 zeros and the 3. Any intervention, especially one that is prophylactic, must cause fewer harms to the recipient than the infection. Since children have the lowest death rate from COVID infection, the cost benefit of requiring children to wear an investigational face covering with emergency safety issues is especially difficult to justify. Anthony Fauci was clear that asymmetric transmission was not a threat. He stated, and I quote again, "In all the history of respiratory-borne viruses of any type, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. The driver of outbreaks is always the symptomatic person." Furthermore, the mandatory mouth mask in schools is a major threat to a child's development. It ignores the essential needs of a growing child. The well-being of children and young people is highly dependent on emotional connection with others. Masks create a threatening and unsafe environment where emotional connection becomes difficult. Regardless of the lack of safety and efficacy behind the decision to require a child to wear a mask, it is illegal to mandate EUA-approved investigational medical therapies without informed consent. Mask use for viral transmission prevention is authorized for emergency use only. Emergency use authorization by the FDA means the products are investigational and experimental only. The statute granting the FDA the power to authorize a medical product of emergency use requires that the person be administered and the unapproved product be advised of his or her right to refuse administration of this product. The statute further recognizes that settled doctrine that medical experiments or clinical research may not be performed on human subjects without the expressed, informed consent of the individual receiving the treatment. The right to avoid the imposition of human experimentation is fundamental, rooted in the Nuremberg Code, which I spoke to at the last board meeting.
We're at 5.5 minutes. Do you have a final thought you'd like to wrap with in about 10,
The law
15?
is very clear. It is unlawful to conduct medical research, even in the case of emergency, unless steps are taken to secure informed consent. I urge you to comply with the federal and state law. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Is Emily Zarling out there?
Emily Zarling?
Emily Zarling? Okay. And after Emily, we will have Kelly Falk on deck, please.
Good evening. I wasn't planning on speaking. My name is Emily Zarling. I went to school in Monroe, graduated from Monroe. I currently work as an RN at University Hospital in Madison. I want to echo a lot of the sentiments of the voices of masks optional for my children. My children were absolutely miserable last year, from not being able to breathe when they were running around in gym class indoors, to teachers giving them a hard time for taking a mask break. I dried their tears, I gave them hugs. I want to make the medical decisions for my children in regards to masks, vaccines, whatever. I don't want to co-parent with the school board or any government. But I do want to touch on hospitals. I work in a hospital. I want to touch on the fact that you may be waiting for a bed, but it's not because of the bed. It's because of the staff. I am potentially facing termination in November because of my unwillingness to vaccinate myself. If I walk away, it's because of my own health autonomy that matters more. But that decision, with other staff leaving for more lucrative travel jobs in Florida or Texas or California, for every nurse on my floor that I don't have, I can't take between 2 and 4 patients. Patient safety matters, so many days beds stay open, as there are no nurses to care for them. Patients wait for days in area hospitals to transfer to UW. It is staff, not beds, that are in shortage more often than not. My phone gets texts regularly with critical staffing needs. I received 3 just today. Finally, this isn't going to get better. I just ask that you leave the parenting decisions to me, my husband, and the other parents in the district on what matters to their children. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. Kelly Falk, you're up next, and then Nick Baker on deck, please.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Polk. I was not planning on speaking tonight. I pretty much given up on doing public school this year. Once the mask mandate went in, we stopped sending our kids. We're still hoping that you guys give parents the choice again. I also wasn't comfortable with how the school board responded to the question regarding vaccination and sports. So I don't feel it's okay for any coach to say, hey, I don't want you to miss this game, I don't want you to miss this practice, so inject this into yourself. Because it's experimental, it's not acceptable. Even if it wasn't experimental, that's not okay. It is not okay. That's not anybody's prerogative other than the parents and the child. Also, I've also thought that, maybe the school district should put it to a vote. Poll the parents. But the first 3 days of school, I think you saw what the parents say. I think about 80 to 90% said, we're sending our kids to school without masks. That's what we feel comfortable with. We've looked at the data. I understand that you guys are in a hard position because you're deciding for a lot of students. But the parents spoke on those first 3 days of school of who wanted to send their kids and who felt comfortable. With the kids running around all summer, none of them had masks on. They were rolling around, doing sports, having fun, being kids, the way that they're supposed to be. Let these kids have somewhat of a normal childhood like we did. Let them breathe, let them roll around. If this would not have been given a name, we would have had a normal cold and flu season. The fear is what drove this to be as big as it is. When you add fear and anxiety to anything, your body cannot respond the way it should. Also, I just wanted to say that not a single one of us in this room is going to die one day sooner or one day later than God intends us to, no matter how many masks you put on your face. Thank you for your time. I hope you take this into consideration.
Thank you, Kelly.
Hello, my name is Nick Baker. Congratulations, I'm the last speaker. I'm sure that you've had facts and figures thrown at you all night, and I'm not going to waste my time with any of that. I do want to point out the fact that if you guys decide to make the decision to not do this because of the recommendations by pediatricians and safety, that I think you should re-examine the drug policy that I spoke at last year, because I see that we've also notched it down to, we're only doing class 4 athletes are only the ones that the drug testing now applies to, so it doesn't apply to band or the mathletes or the debate team, just to the athletes. And if there's a reason that safety, says that drug testing is really good for students, and safety says that mask mandating and vaccines is really good for students, you should have an equal weight to each of those. And as far as masking goes, my wife is an RN. She dealt with COVID patients all year, and she told me some horrible stories of what happens. Some of these people might get COVID today, tomorrow, and they might die. But if they've given themselves every opportunity to get the shot or wear a mask and they've not taken it, that's on them. I have no sympathy for people who will not take a precaution to protect themselves. And you guys are painted with that decision. If you guys recommend masks and they decide not to wear them, you're off the hook. There's nobody that can say, hey, you should have done more. There will be people that say that, because that's how it works. But you can rest easy at night knowing that you've done what you needed to do to let them make an informed decision for themselves. And if they choose not to, you did what you could. That's what it comes down to. People have to decide for themselves what they're willing to do. I myself got the Pfizer vaccine as soon as I was eligible, and my wife obviously got it when she was eligible, and I've not grown green twitchy horns or funny appendages, so it's working. Might there be in 10 years a risk? There could be. But when I was in the Army, I got lots of shots that I didn't get a lot of descriptions on what they were going to do for me. So I'm used to that. There's a level of risk that everybody has to accept. But most importantly, I appreciate all of you tonight being up there, sitting in those chairs. It's not an easy job. Administrators across the country I was really surprised I didn't see a police car. I'm glad I didn't see a police car. I don't think that's the kind of community Monroe is. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. So thank you, everybody. That concludes our public comment for this evening. We appreciate you all spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts. It can be tough to walk up to that mic and do that, so we appreciate you doing that. And we'll take all of those comments into consideration as we deliberate. Additionally, we did receive several emails for folks who couldn't be here tonight to make public comments. So in lieu of them being here, I'll just list their names, and these are folks that are in favor of continuing the policy in some form. Matthew Anderson, Claire Leeds, Kyle Baker would request it be continued for all grades. Ann Lang, Jill Lutzinger, Jennifer Skase, Stacy Kavanaugh, Rachel Nipple would like all grades. Damian Nipple would like it imposed for all grades. Betsy Bass would like it imposed for all grades. And then we also had a letter from Dr. Darren Pipp, the Chief Medical Officer, advocating for universal masking. So that's all of our public comments. No old business tonight. New business. First up is an update on our North Side project.
All right, and joining us this evening is Tony Buss from C.G. Schmidt. And Tony, we do have a microphone on the floor, so you're welcome to join us there if you want to update us on the work that's being done at North Side. And board members along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them of Tony.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rick. Good evening there. So my name's Tony. I'm in charge of or overseeing the construction on North Side. So we had a good, successful summer this summer at the school district. We're trying to get a head start on a bigger project for next year. So all the restrooms were completed. Last time I talked, we were just getting ready for the open house, which was kind of the big event. We were just a couple days prior to that, I believe. We were finishing up some cleaning, putting some plumbing fixtures in, things of that nature. So I think siding on the exterior was maybe just getting started. So everything went off well with the open house. We got everything done just in the nick of time. They were turning on water for some of the fixtures kind of in the afternoon before the event started. But as far as I heard from everybody at the school and from Rich Setner and people around me, things went well and the bathrooms are performing as they should. There was one small issue that happened a week later that has since been fixed. But all in all, I'd say it's been good. Since the last time we talked, we put some of the siding on, of course, some of the landscaping stone in. Our big goal was to get everything on the west side of the building re-sided and the south side as we worked around and get past the main entrance by the day school started. We just barely made it by a day or two. So we were pretty happy about that, and then we just finished up some of the east side or kind of back of house areas last week. So all the siding is done as of now. We do have a few things coming up yet still. Some gutters. Installing some gutters on kind of the playground area, and then also on the east side, kind of by the back loading dock area. We'll be doing that this Wednesday through Friday. I've been coordinating with Rich and Amy, and we will be doing that around recess hours. And when we are out there, we'll be caution taping off the areas, and things of that nature to make sure that no kids are impacted. But the whole plan is when it's recess time, we'll be moving to the east side of the building, more back of house, and flip-flop back and forth, and they'll be working late at nights and things of that nature to get done. So we will adapt as necessary to make sure everybody's safe and the work gets done. Other than that, though, last time I talked, there was some multi-use sinks for the activity areas that were on hold. Those shipped today. I did get confirmation. It'll take about a week to get here, so next week in the evenings or potentially next Saturday, a week from this upcoming Saturday, we'll put those fixtures in. get rid of the temporary ones that we have up there. Also next week, the cubbies are due in for the 4th and 5th grade wing, the west side of the building. I talked about the kindergarten wing a few weeks ago. We just installed the cubbies over there. But due to material lead times and things of that nature, the cubbies for the 4th and 5th grade wing just were delayed a little bit. So those will be in next week. Planning on delivering as soon as early release lets out next Friday. So at 1:30 we'll deliver and stage all the cubbies where they need to go, and then work Friday night and Saturday to get those done for school on Monday. Other than that, there's just a few minor punch list items in the back of the house that you probably wouldn't even notice. Some insulation in the mechanical room, things of that nature. Other than that, though, what we're kind of focusing on now is planning for next summer. So we do have MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing trades doing their own design build. So we've made some good progress on that. We've got another meeting tomorrow to kind of see the design development stage of that. Usually design goes in, I guess, 3 major stages. Schematic design, which was done about a month ago. Design developments, which is finishing up now. And then construction documents, which is the next set. Once construction documents are done and approved, then we can order all the equipment. The plan is to do that by the end of the year, so everything's in good shape come summer. The other thing we did recently this morning, we finished up our last walkthrough with abatement contractors, just to double check and get some abatement pricing on some of the remaining things that need to be abated for asbestos in the school for next year. The game plan is, and it's not all vetted out just yet, but the game plan is to try to get some of that work done during some of the school breaks throughout the year, so that when next summer comes, we can just hit the ground running and get into the whole HVAC overhaul. So that's kind of where we're at right now and where we're headed. Any questions from anybody?
Tony, I want to thank you for coming all the Monday nights that you do come at evening on an update, everything you guys have done. Just mentioned about next summer. Are you confident that with the disruptions in the supply chain that we can get the required things to put in there? Because that's going to be the major component of this rebuild.
Yes, pretty confident. That's kind of the reason why we bought almost everything this year. Roof insulation was a big thing. We ordered that so it can be here next year. The HVAC equipment, they'll be choosing manufacturers that have lead times that are favorable, and the experts that deal with that aren't concerned at this point in time. And in fact, they feel confident waiting until February to order it, but I'm trying to push for by the year end just so we have a little cushion. So, I mean, there's always risks out there, but generally speaking, no, I think we're in good shape.
Thank you very much.
Any other question?
Just that I was at the open house. It looks really nice.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
thank you.
Tony. All right. Thanks, Tony.
All right. We're on to item B. It's approval of our 2021 through 2022 preliminary operating budget, getting that set for the annual meeting. So Rick and Ron.
Yeah, so Ron's going to be leading us through the major numbers, and so the board is aware we do have a few new board members where this will be your first annual meeting. We do have to have the board take action on the preliminary operating budget that goes in the budget booklet, and that needs to be printed, and we need to notify the community of that in the local paper previous to the annual meeting. So Ron will be walking you through that, and we will be requesting action by the board on the 21-22 preliminary operating budget. So Ron?
Yeah, I'll go through a lot of the highlights tonight, kind of off the summary page. We do have the detailed budget sheets, both comparing budget to budget as well as last year's actual audited to budget that go into the annual meeting booklet, as well as the potential projected levy and levy history that we currently have in the revenue limit. And so if you have any questions on any of them, I can either answer them tonight or we can certainly have a discussion between now and the annual meeting, which is actually when the community, in conjunction with the board, everyone gets to kind of vote on that issue, approve the final budget or the initial budget, I should say, and levy Wisconsin's a little strange for those of you who haven't been to one of our annual meetings. We won't actually get our final state aid numbers until October 15th. So even though we will at that second Monday in October approve our district budget and our district levy, about 2 weeks later than that, we will have to update it once we get those final aid numbers from the state and the property valuations, et cetera, that come out from the state. Too late for that. We can't push later than that because, as Rick said, we need to get it published in the paper in advance of the annual meeting. So it's a cumbersome process, but we'll work through that as we always do every year. The good news for this year, I mean, there's some good news to start with. Certainly the levy right now is projecting as a 2.43% reduction from last year, and so that's certainly very good news. We're also looking at, right now I'm using a very conservative 4% projected property valuation increase for the coming year. Our consultants who we work with are actually projecting that it may be a 6 or 7% increase, which would drive our levy rate even lower if that comes to fruition in the fall. So we've got a pretty conservative number in there right now. That mill rate for the district, the levy rate for the district, is projecting then at a 6.18% reduction. So we're down to $9.18 per thousand for the school district, which is 60 cents lower than any levy rate we've had in the last 30 years. And anybody who knows school finance and property valuations know that prior to that, in the 70s and 80s, property levy rates were much higher than they have been since the implementation of revenue limits now 28 years ago. And so that's probably the lowest levy rate we've seen in this district in a very, very long time. As with most recent years, we are looking at a budgeted deficit. This year it's less than $600,000. Each year we typically bring our expenditures in a couple percent below budget. So that would typically mean that at the end of the year we should still be in the black, even though we have a budgeted deficit at the start of the year, just by some of the economization and not spending out budgets when we don't have to during the course of the year. That usually makes up some of that ground on the budgeted deficit. This year we have budgeted $223,000 for the original remaining ESSER 2 funds. Recall that the federal government, there was the initial CARES fund of a couple $100,000 for the district. The ESSER funds, ESSER 2 funds, which we got a little over $900,000 for, and last year we claimed about $725,000. And then there's the ESSER 3 funds, which are coming, which would be about $2.1 million for over the district has over the next 3 years. So for the coming year, we'll be claiming out the remainder of our ESSER 2 funds, as well as $700,000, or about 1/3 of our ESSER 3 funds for the coming fiscal year. So that's going to leave $1.4 million going forward to the following school year. And that's important because the state legislature this year did not allow any increase to school budget revenue limits. So, they basically said you're getting these federal dollars to deal with the COVID expenditures that you may have and to mitigate some of the returns to school for children. But because of that, we're not going to let you raise additional funds by your revenue limit. And so unfortunately, we're going to have to use some of those funds just to offset our normal budget expenditures. So it's important that we then have more money going forward to next year because we once again won't see any increase to our revenue limit next year. There is some concerning news in that area. So our revenue limit this year went down over $600,000. Our revenues in the school district have been pretty flat for about the last 10 to 15 years. And with declining enrollment, we sometimes see them eroding away. Last year, with a number of concerned parents not knowing whether they wanted to send their children to school or not, certainly had an impact. But an even bigger impact was in the summer of 2020 when we did not have a summer school program, as did most school districts in the state did not have summer school. It drove that count down. And so many school districts are seeing a reduction in the revenue limit. I know there was a plea to the legislators to consider that when they set their policy for the coming year, but they did not. And so it's going to really impact our revenue limit for 3 years because our enrollment's on a 3-year rolling average. As we look forward, we're waiting to see what those final third Friday counts are for us, because that'll help drive our numbers for the coming school year. Right now, our aid is being projected at the aid number that the state has given us since the state budget got finalized. They will be recalculating all those aid factors based upon everyone's actual expenditures, every individual school districts across the state for last year. In our case, we actually spent very close to what our budgeted expenditures were, closer than usual, but we were still under budget. And so I'm hoping that with some of the other districts maybe not spending out as much of their budget as they usually do, that we might actually be able to see our aid projection come a little better than what the state initially said it's going to be. Because although they put additional aid numbers into schools, no revenue limit, it means that those aid dollars are basically tax relief. Statewide, there was an increase in those aid dollars across the state. For the school district of Monroe, we actually saw a decrease in our state aid, and so our equalization aid. So we're looking at a little over a couple $100,000 reduction in that state aid. So I'm hoping that maybe by the time we get to the fall, when they finalize the number, we might look a little better than that and be close to what our aid number was last year. If we do, that means that our revenue limit, or I should say that will mean that our levy will be even lower, because again, the additional dollars don't allow us to spend more on education. They simply allow for tax relief because there was no revenue limit increase. Kind of went over the CARES and ESSER. Again, for the last year, we claimed $200,000 and a little bit more for CARES and a little over $725,000 for ESSER 2. For the coming year, we have the plan to use those remaining ESSER 2 funds of about $223,000 and $700,000 of ESSER 3 funds. So they're going to basically net out. And so even with those netting out, we're looking at our budgeted expenditures being about 2.5% less than last year's budget expenditures. And keep in mind, last year at the start of COVID, we had a lot of planned expenditures for PPE, medical, safety supplies, et cetera. As I said, our expenditures came in a little under last year. So even when you look at what our actual expenditures were last year, the new budget is only a 0.73% increase over last year's actual expenditures, because with our revenues not really growing, obviously our expenditures can't grow either. Our revenues for the year are right now projecting at 1.65% below last year. Again, that's driven by the fact that there was no revenue limit increase in per pupil amount. Our count, our student count is down, or was down last year, and so that reduction in our revenue limit of over $600,000 drives our total revenues year over year to a lower number than it was last year. And that's been a perpetual thing. That's why we have our operating referendum that covers some of those funds, but our operating referendum has been flat for a number of years. We haven't asked for additional increases to that. And so as our revenue limit erodes away, it does kind of impact our budget, and it keeps us maintaining at the same amount or sometimes even reducing. The final things, as far as changes that you'll see in the documents from when you last looked at them in June, we updated all the expenditures to address all of the staffing changes and staffing placements that happened over the summer, so it reflects kind of where we are right now as of today in the district. The revenues were updated at the time we set it. The state budget hadn't been set, so we updated it based upon the impacts of the state budget that was set. And so it reflects all those revenues. And again, as I said, we will make adjustments in October once we get the final numbers from the state. Fund 80 budget for the public library was not in there when you looked at it in June. It is now in there. And one big change that you may note is in Fund 21. Our district activity accounts historically have all been in what's called Fund 60, where they kind of sit out there and they're accounted for, but they really don't reflect on the district budget other than, we kind of track those in the buildings. That's now all part of the district budget and will be accounted for in Fund 21, which is the same fund where we account for gifts. And so we have about $500,000 worth of revenues and expenditures that run through our activity accounts every year. Obviously, the majority of those are at the high school. And so we do have those dollars now in the budget. It's really a placeholder for this year. When we get to next year and we are able to see kind of which activity accounts have typically the majority of that, because we've never tracked it on our own budget at my office anyhow. It's tracked on a spreadsheet at the building level. We'll be able to then put that into the individual little pockets so you can kind of see by individual activity accounts where those $500,000 of revenues and expenditures are occurring within the buildings. So any questions? I kind of went through it rather quickly. At the annual meeting, the community will have a chance, if they have any questions, again, to look at it. The biggest news probably people are excited to hear tonight is about the levy, and that's certainly great news. Just going back as soon as 2016-17, we were at $11.75 per thousand, to now be down to $9.18 per thousand is great news on the levy front. Obviously, there's some concerns about the decrease in revenues.
So, Ron, we get held harmless for the decrease in enrollment for 1 year, right? This is the year where we're held harmless for the decrease from the previous year?
Right. So basically, you have a 1-year delay in a catch-up on those enrollments. And so last year, we saw a really significant decrease in our enrollment, and obviously, we had no summer school in 2020. So we saw a big decrease as we developed our revenue limit for last year. And as you said, Rich, there's a hold harmless in there that delays the impacts of that for 1 year, which is why we're seeing a $615,000 decrease this year. Now, the other impact of that, as I said, is those enrollments are a 3-year average. So we're only in year 2 now of the average, right? That's actually going to have a double weighting on our revenue limit. And so, and with no per pupil increase, that's going to carry even more weight in this year's budget. And then next year it'll start to fade out because it is year 3, but it'll only have a third of a weighting next year. This will be an impact on our district budget over the next 2 years and probably into the year after that. But last year was the real driver of it. It's just we're getting the real impact, the biggest impact right now.
Okay. And with the assistance of ESSER and between those funds, what do you project the impact to fund balance will be? Are we going to be close to cash flow borrowing, or?
No, we're actually looking okay at the moment, right? Like I said, right now we're with a budgeted deficit of $600,000, right? And that's because we've had some retirements and we've held a lot of things as low as we could. In this last year, we actually were able to bring our budget in with a couple $100,000 increase, increase to our fund balance. And so I think for the coming year, we should be able to, hopefully, unless something surprising comes up, we should be able to offset that $600,000 deficit by other savings throughout the year and kind of hold our own. That's why we need to have that $1.4 million of money set aside for next year, because next year, now we're going to have a 2-year impact of that revenue limit enrollment, as well as the enrollment, or as well as the revenue limit freeze. And so we'll really see the impact start to hit us next year. Where it comes into having to use fund balance would be if we decide that, we need to really look at some programming to offer to address some of the COVID-related catch-up for our students, because I know we're looking at some of those things. If we put some of those into place and those costs are significant enough where we can't use those dollars to offset the rest of our budget, then yes, then we'll probably have to dip into our fund balance to address that. And the only thing I guess we can hope for is that 2 years from now that they pass a better state budget than they are now, and maybe we can move forward. We'll also be, I think we're out to 2024 would be the time when we would have to look at our revenue limit referendum again. Our hope was that certainly we wouldn't raise it. It's been 1.5 million for a number of years now. And that we might even be able to decrease it if they don't start allowing us to gain some more dollars on a per pupil basis on that revenue limit. We might have to reconsider that. And that's not us, that's all districts, right? And so it's a double-edged sword. You have a great looking levy rate, taxes are, at a really low rate, but then your community has to come out and say, yep, we want to levy on ourselves some more. And it would be nice if we could remedy some of that at the state level, but revenue limits do work in the sense of, helping reduce levy rates. It's just a fine balancing point.
Any other questions for Ron? Okay, then we would be looking for a motion to approve the 21 through 22 preliminary operating budget for the annual meeting as presented by Ron Olson.
So moved.
Got a motion by Tim,
A second.
a second by Teresa. By voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Up next, we've got a discussion and potential action on student representation on the board.
All right, and at this time, Marissa Vosberg, who spoke to us earlier about student representation, she actually joined us in our first meeting in August. Marissa, you're welcome to, you can either join us on stage and sit next to Mr. Olson, or you can go to that microphone, whichever you're more comfortable with. But we're going to want you at a microphone so we can hear you. Why don't you come up? And then Mr. Olson will give you the microphone. So before Marissa talks to you, I'll talk about my experience when I was the superintendent in Adams Friendship. We had student representatives on our board. In that district, our board met monthly, but we had 2 student representatives. Sometimes we'd had both of them, sometimes we'd have one of them, because sometimes they were in, whether it be sports or, drama or, pep band or something like that. But we would every year have 2 students that were selected, and in that district, they were actually selected in accordance with what would be the student senate here. I'm not saying that that's the way that it would have to be done, but that's how it was done there, is that people who were on the student senate were eligible, and they would apply and they would select their 2 representatives, and they would attend board meetings. They would get board materials, excluding confidential information, of course, that would apply to employee matters and student matters. But the other information they would get, so they would learn a little bit about government, they would learn a little bit about the operations of a school district and a board of education. Board members would try to get feedback on them in conversations that probably warranted student participation. There were some, when it came to approving the budget or something, they would often have very little to say or contribute because obviously that wasn't something that as a student was a big issue to them. But I found their perspective refreshing. That district had student representatives for, I would estimate, about 20 years before I was there, and they continued the 4 years I was superintendent there. And we valued their feedback, and it was nice to have them with us at meetings. Even there was an occasional meeting where neither one could show up because of other commitments they had, and then we just no different than a board member being missing. They just wouldn't be there, and obviously wouldn't be able to weigh in on items. They were non-voting entities, so they never had any voting authority. They just participated and gave us student perspectives on matters that they could, and they would also usually report on some things that were going on in the district, both at the high school and also middle and elementary schools. They would get information from the principals and just share some updates from a student's perspective. So that's how it worked there. We had a board policy, and we were a Neola district in Adams Friendship, so we did develop a board policy that kind of guided how that would work. And ultimately, what I plan to do is, if the board wants student representatives in the next month or so, while we would go back to the high school and say, All right, the board wants student representatives. Now you have to figure out how you're going to select them. I do have policy committee meetings scheduled in October where we would work on the policy for student representatives on the board, and then the full board would probably act on those in November. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't have student representatives joining us. We would just have to kind of monitor their participation based on what we felt was, the best way to do it until the policy were developed. So, because I'd hate to wait until December for the policy to be developed in the school years, almost 1/3, if not 1/3 over. So those are my thoughts and my experiences with student representatives. Marissa, you talked to us in August, so why don't you share some of your thoughts and talk about some ideas that you think would be worthwhile in exploring this, a student representative or representatives for this board.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Mr. Waske said, I've known a few kids who've been representatives. I've talked with some school board members who've had representatives, and it's been nothing but positive. And that's really what inspired me to kind of bring this idea to the table here. What I would propose is either having 2 representatives, one from the junior class and one from the senior class, or 2 representatives, one from the junior class and one from the senior class, or 2 from the junior class and 2 from the senior class, excuse me. Kind of having it be a 2-year position, the senior being more of a mentor to the junior. You could also have 2 in each grade, kind of partners in that mentoring pair. I only say 2 just because then you'd have more likely to have students at more of the meetings. Like Mr. Waske said, sometimes there can be conflicts. We're all busy. One thing that I did want to address is he said that in the Adams Friendship District, only students on the Student Senate would be eligible to run. I would propose that it should be open to all the students. I think there's a lot of great groups in our school, the Equity for Everyone, the Model UN, Student Senate. All of these clubs give the students great leadership skills, and I think that you'd get a lot more variety of perspectives and a wider range of experiences in our school by opening it up to a lot of those groups. I would propose either having an application process that includes a short interview, or having an interview process maybe with a board member, a community stakeholder, and somebody from an administration perspective, either a principal or Mr. Waske or somebody else from the district office. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Other than that, that's kind of what I'm thinking for now. But obviously, it's amendable to whatever the board would see fit, or however they think that student representatives could fulfill their needs.
All right, thank you, Marissa. So Marissa suggested that that we make it open, and ultimately, I don't think, I think from a starting perspective, I think it probably would make more sense to leave it open-ended and let anybody who wanted to apply. I mean, I think there are some ways we could do this, and I haven't talked in great detail with the high school principals because this, idea was kind of still in the developmental stages, but I think we certainly could provide, both written information and maybe a short video to explain to people what would be involved with it and let people know how to apply. Give a few weeks for people to apply, and then we could, come up with a variety of different selection processes. I think that would be relatively easy, and I think in the end, we certainly, if we started now, the second Monday in September, I think that it's reasonable that we could have student participation either for the first or at the very least the second board meeting in October. And then ultimately we would have the policy approved in the second meeting in November. And I don't see any problem with having student representatives, for 2 meetings without policy. I mean, I think our behaviors will guide the policy in the short term. I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to give kids the rich experience in the present rather than waiting until we had all the policy, ironed out, and then it's December and, half the school year's over. So ultimately, we want to hear from board members. Do you like the idea? And B, do you have any thoughts on how members would be selected? Because I think in the end, all we're going to ask is a motion to approve student representation, and then I would invite Marissa to work collaboratively with myself and a member of the board, and we would come up with a selection process. So I'd ask for one board member to volunteer and serve with myself and Marissa, and we can come up with in the next week or so, we can come up with a process.
Thoughts?
I think it's a great idea. Marissa, and some of the schools that you've talked to or some of the people you've interviewed, did they change the program in any way? As they got feedback, had it been going on for a while, and how had it evolved?
Yeah, absolutely. One girl I know from the Green Bay area, the Bayport School District, I know that their program originally just started by having one or two students, or I think it was just one student on just the regular board. But then as their program grew and they saw that how the students were flourishing, they added, I think they have 3 or 4 representatives now, and some of the kids started attending some of the committee meetings as well. I know that the girl I talked to sat on the school safety committee because that was kind of a more pressing issue with a lot of student involvement in it. So that's pretty much the only one that I know of that really amended their policy in recent years. But yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's great also. I think that I really appreciate you coming and talking to us. So thank you, Marissa. I think I really like your idea of having 2 representatives, a junior and a senior, and making it a 2-year commitment. I like the idea of opening up to everybody because I think we have a lot of great students on a lot of committees who could provide some great insight and valuable information. So I would trust Mr. Wesky and you and the principals to open it up and have a selection process.
Yeah, I too, I like what's been proposed, 2 representatives over a possible 2-year term, and getting it started this year as quickly as possible, with you helping us out a little bit there. And thanks very much for coming to speak to us on 2 occasions in front of 2 very large rooms. And if poise and presence is also something that you earn through going through this process, then I think having that opportunity for kids that can come sit with us is well worth it. So.
Well, I appreciate you having me on both occasions.
What kind of selection criteria have they used, or is that something that, well, I know we're going to develop that, but I mean, was it a grade point and up, or was it an involvement and up? We want to make sure that kids have the time and
Absolutely. I know in one, when I was speaking with a member of the Oak Creek School District, they used student senate representatives, and the student senate members actually voted on it. In other places, I know in Bayport, it's open to all students who meet the age level requirements, that being high school. And I would kind of lean more in favor to that because I think that you'd get more students who aren't as involved in things. They'd be able to make more board meetings, and they'd have a better view of our entire school rather than just one facet of it.
Okay.
Other
All right.
thoughts? Otherwise, we'd be looking for a motion to approve, and then ultimately, if we did approve it, then I would be asking for one board member to join with me and Marissa in developing some guidelines for the first selection process.
Entertain a motion.
Oh, so moved. Sorry.
I'll second.
A motion by Nikki and a second by Tim to approve student representation on the Board of Education by voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, Marissa.
Is there a board member who would be willing to give perhaps an hour of their time in the next week or so, probably between now and maybe the middle of next week, where we could work on some selection criteria, and I could set up time to meet with Marissa, and we could do that. So is there a board member who would be willing to do that?
I would do it if we can do it early next week instead of this week. I got some things.
Okay, I'm available Monday and Tuesday next week, so maybe we can work on something. Okay, thanks, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim.
And we could probably do it virtually if we needed to.
Okay.
So, all right.
Okay.
Thanks, Marissa.
We'll move on to the Pupil Services report.
Okay, that's me. For those of you that have been on the board for a while, you know this is an annual report that I have to give. There's some requirements by state law that I need to report to the board on an annual basis. This is usually a report I'm excited again this year, but usually it's a little bit longer than what it'll be tonight out of consideration for those here. We're going to give you the consolidated version of this, as I know the board has a lot of work to do, and I'll try to be half as articulate as Marissa was up here. So we'll go through this. We're going to start out by taking a look at our special ed numbers across the district. This first graph, and board members, it's projected behind you. You also have it in your board packet. Just gives you a breakdown of our disability areas across the district as compared to the state. So the red bars are Monroe, the black bars are the state average. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but what you can see is that we're pretty close across our different categories as compared to the state. You'll see in some areas we're a little higher, some areas we're a little lower. The total ends up being that we're at about 14.9% versus 14% for the state. Historically, we've done a good job of keeping those numbers low. We've popped up recently, and we really worked hard this past year to take a look at some of those areas that were higher. Specifically, our speech language category was significantly higher, almost double what the state average was. We have a great speech path team that really dug into this, and we conducted a self-audit, and we were able to bring it down significantly from 5.8% to 3.8%, and that's largely reflected in those total numbers. So that gives you a sense of our numbers across the board. As we take a look at the next slide, what you'll see is a breakdown of our state test results from the last year. Now, obviously, this last year was a different experience, but I wanted to give you a summary of our results anyway. Again, you'll see a comparison of our special ed state results, or special ed results on the state test on both the Ford and the DLM, which is the Dynamic Learning Maps assessment. A couple things that you'll notice. First is that we did a good job of testing the vast majority of our special ed kids, whereas I think a lot of other districts weren't as dedicated in that area. Last year, districts had a bit of an exemption due to the unique situation that we're going through. We felt it was important to still assess all of our kids, and the result being that we were able to see that despite the fact that we didn't opt out as many kids as other districts, we're still hanging in there with the state average. For ELA, we're at 9% versus 9.5%. For math, we're at 11.7% versus 10.6% for the state. Those numbers obviously aren't great. We're talking about a group of kids that have the most significant learning needs in the district. And while we're right at or above the state average, we feel it's our responsibility to work hard to get those numbers up, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we plan to do that. This next slide goes over something called the JFN rankings, or the Joint Federal Notifications rankings. This is something that, as a special ed director, I get every year. It provides a variety of categories and rates us. It gives us a score anywhere from 0 to 2. In the parentheses, you'll see our percentile rank within the state. And what you'll see is we did well in a lot of categories. You'll see some that we need to improve upon. And I went through this with our special ed team before the school year started, and basically what we did is we said anything that we don't have 2 out of 2 points, we need to pay attention to. And for us, as we take a look at this, if there's one thing that really struck us as needing to be addressed immediately, it is the educational environment for those kids that are ages 6 to 21. We got 0 of 2 points there. So there's good news and bad news related to that. The good news is that's something that is within our control to improve, and we're already in the process of doing that. We're making a concerted effort to make sure that our kids are being moved into the regular classroom. What you see here is not the result of people not doing a good job. In fact, I think it's the opposite. It's the unintentional consequence of really well-intentioned, hardworking people that wanted to provide the best they could to kids. And so many times they thought it was in the child's best interest to pull them out of the classroom and provide extra support. What we know about that is sometimes expectations aren't quite what they are in the regular classroom. We don't work on the same learning targets, and as a result, we start to see gaps in their learning. So we're really working hard to make sure that we keep kids in the regular ed classroom whenever possible. We know that there are kids that won't be successful in that learning environment, and we'll continue to provide opportunities for them outside of the regular ed classroom, but certainly we know that more kids need to be in the regular ed environment. We also believe that if we do that well, that's going to impact our proficiency in ELA and math. As I said, We're going to make sure that all of our kids are connected with grade level learning targets. We're going to measure their progress. We're going to provide learning progressions to make sure that those kids stay connected, stay in the classroom, and continue to move forward. And then ultimately, if we do that the right way, we believe that that's going to impact our graduation and dropout numbers as well. I'll be talking to you a little bit later about the SOAR coordinator position, and I believe that there's some connection to that program as well. The next slide gives you a breakdown of our district goal and the priority areas. Todd and I went over that previously. I'm not going to go through all this again, but what I wanted to talk about, and the reason that I included it, is to say that the district improvement plan for the special ed department is the same as the work that we're doing for the regular ed. In other words, it's the same work. This was developed with our at-risk learners in mind. Basically what we're doing is saying we need to get those kids in the classroom. We need to make sure that we're clear about what the learning targets are, what they need to learn. We need to measure how they're doing relative to those learning targets. We need to organize, monitor, and make those those results easy to monitor and to act upon so that we can provide responsive instruction. And then finally, make sure that we have time for our teachers to respond to the needs of those kids. And that's what we're doing this year, and we're very confident, extremely confident that we're going to be able to pull that off. And we believe that not only will that have an impact for our regular ed students, but certainly it'll have a significant impact for our special ed students as well. All right, so I'm going to shift now to talk a little bit about some of the behavioral and social emotional needs of our kids. What you'll see behind you is, or on your screen, is the BESS results. For those of you that aren't familiar with the BESS is the Behavior and Emotional Screening Survey that we administer to all kids in grades 4 through 12, unless their parents exempt them from participating in that survey. And typically, what we see is about an 85, 10, 5 breakdown in terms of normal, elevated, and extremely elevated. So this tool gives us a good idea of where kids are at twice a year in terms of their mental health and behavioral needs. That's been pretty steady over time. What we've seen over the last year and a half with everything that's going on with COVID is that we've seen a slight shift from normal to elevated. So right now we're at about 82% normal, we're at 13% elevated, and then 5% extremely elevated. That's not as pronounced as we had anticipated. I think part of that is related to the hard work that's being done by our school counselors and our school psychologists, not to mention our dedicated teachers and paraprofessionals. But overall, I feel really good about where these numbers are at. There's an incredible amount of work that we do to monitor kids, look at a lot of different metrics and indicators to make sure that kids don't go throughout their school day without being reviewed in some way, shape, or form to make sure they're getting the supports that they need. The next several slides, I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically what I want you to know about these is it gives you an overview of the number of ODRs, or office discipline referrals. For those of you in the audience that aren't familiar with that, that's basically when kids violate the rules. Think of things that you get sent to the principal's office for. And looking at that across the last 3 years, and then it also gives you a sense of how our numbers are stacking up against national data. So you'll see, I don't know how well you guys can see that out in the audience, but there's a really light gray line towards the bottom. That represents the 25th percentile. The darker maroon in the middle is the median score, and up top is a red line, which represents the 75th percentile. We want to be under those lines because the lower those numbers, the better. That means that we don't have as many office discipline referrals. Obviously, over the last couple of years, we've had periods of time when kids haven't been in school, and so that impacted the numbers. But I think what you'll see by looking at each one of these charts is that our schools are doing incredibly well. And again, sometimes I feel bad sitting up here and sharing these results because this is the result of the teachers, the paraprofessionals, the therapists, the counselors, the psychs, principals that really work their tails off to make sure that we're clear about expectations. We teach kids how to behave in school, and then we just have some amazing kids in our school. So you'll see across the board, we've got great numbers. We've had months where we've had flare-ups, but overall, we're right at, or in many cases below that 25th percentile line, which is where we want to be. So overall, I'm really proud of the numbers across all of our schools with regard to office discipline referrals. If we take a look at our bullying and harassment data, this has been a focus of my department over the last 10 plus years. You can see the history. We had periods where we had over 150 reports of bullying or harassment. We've really worked hard to focus on this, providing explicit instruction to kids, talking with the staff, looking for some of the indicators that suggest this is going on, and what we've seen is a steep decline in the reports of bullying or harassment over the years. Now, whenever I report this, I always like to be clear that this doesn't mean that we're getting every single incident that's happening. We know there's a lot going on. I'm not suggesting that there's no incidents going on in this community right now, because we know that there absolutely are. But from a school perspective, in terms of the number of formal reports that we get, we know it's gone down significantly. Again, this comes with the disclaimer that the last 2 years have been different, right? So that's impacted our numbers. But I think what you'll see is the trend has gone steadily down over the years, and I think it suggests that the work that we're doing is impactful and effective. Seclusion and restraint summary, this is something that I'm required to report by state law. This is, again, something that we're really focused on. Bottom line with this is that our numbers are really good. Obviously, the difference between last year and the 1920 school year is going to be very pronounced, just due to the fact that we had a period of time that kids weren't in school. Regardless, I can tell you, in working with our programs, we do not have a lot of incidents of seclusion and restraint anymore, and that's due to the hard work and dedication of our staff that works with our kids that are most challenged in the areas of emotional regulation and behavior. And we've been able to identify other ways to support those kids. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's quite challenging and stressful, but I give the staff a lot of credit, because we're trying to provide supports that lead to increased trust and feelings of safety versus increasing escalation and conflict. And then we get to our school-based mental health program. We could spend over an hour just talking about this. I think, in order to be brutally honest, last year was really hard on this program, because the delivery system that we set up the year before was difficult to translate into a COVID year. The year prior, I think we had like 229 referrals, so we were serving a lot of kids. Last year we served about 90. That was partly due to family decisions. It was partly due to some of the hardships experienced by our community mental health providers. And so what we did this summer is we met with all those community mental health providers. We talked about some of the challenges. We talked about how we could overcome some of those things. And we've been reaching out to families to bring those numbers back if we feel that those kids continue to have needs. I think one of the things that's really important to identify is that even though it was only 90, of those, 67% were brand new to mental health. In other words, without this program, those kids wouldn't be getting help. So that's something we're really proud of. We have a great team that works really hard, that's focused on this, that dedicates a lot of time to this work, and will continue to do that. And certainly we recognize in these trying times that kids and families continue to need that support, and we're going to do everything we can to help them. So that's about as quick as I can get through that report. Again, I would spend a lot longer normally, and certainly if there's any board members, or for that matter, anyone in the audience, in the community that would like to talk about this, I have a lot of charts that I love to show people. If you want to talk about it, make an appointment. I can spend some time with you, but I'd certainly be willing to answer any questions that the board has at this time.
Well, I just have a question or a comment. Because the 1920 school year was shortened and 2021 was also reduced capacity, it might not be, like, we still might be on a good trend with some of that data, but it might show an increase this year, especially if we're at full capacity most, if not all, of the year.
Yeah, definitely. If you're asking me to guess what those numbers would have looked like without COVID, I would have said those positive trends likely would have continued. They wouldn't have been as significant as what we saw, just due to the fact that we just had a number of days when kids weren't in school. So that's going to impact the numbers.
So we might be able to follow the same trend line as we did before, but the number of incidences might go up.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, that trend line is still going to be moving in the same direction, but it's not going to, once we get to a year where we have kids in school, every day during the school year, hopefully this year, we'll see those numbers start to move back in line with what we were seeing prior to COVID. Good question.
And I apologize, when do we do the best? Do we do a couple times a year?
We do, yep. We do it once in the fall and once in the spring. We're waiting until October to do it this year just because after some research and talking to some professionals across the area, it's been recommended that we don't assess right away just because kids need time to reacclimate to school. We want kids to get some support within their school day and get into the routine, and then we'll take a look at how kids are doing a little bit later. But once we get into October, we're going to start that process.
Thank you.
When we look at the referrals, the new to mental health, yes, that's a really good thing, right? That's a sign that we're reducing the stigma to mental health, and when we have 67% that are new to this, right?
Yeah, to me, that's one of the most powerful numbers
I think
because
so, too.
it really speaks to the availability of services through this program, and I think it, as you said, Nikki, I think there are families that just feel more comfortable with accessing these services through the schools.
Good.
Any additional comments or questions for Joe on the Pupil Services Report?
Yeah, otherwise, like I said, I'd be happy to sit down with anyone that wants to discuss this in detail. I know I went through it pretty fast, but trying to be sensitive to everyone's time.
Appreciate that, Joe, and we appreciate all the efforts of everybody making a difference for the kids. So. Okay, so moving on to item E, this is our discussion on the 21 through 22 COVID-19 protocols with potential action on extending our mask mandate. So just to recap really quick, a couple of meetings ago, we approved our protocols. One meeting ago, we did not opt to make any changes to those. We left that, that discretion to Rick, our superintendent. And he identified the need to take our pre-K-5 schools to a mask required status last Tuesday. So we've got two items here that we're going to discuss together as a board. We're going to discuss them separately. The first one, deciding to extend or alter or to not continue the mandate for pre-K-5 or pre-K-6, and then we'll briefly discuss 7 through 12 or 6 through 12. And I'll let Rick kind of walk us through his recommendation, and then we'll have some board discussion and go from there.
Sure. So on the 27th of August, we had a board meeting in which we determined that we were going to keep masks optional. So what happened is the Wednesday of our first week of school, which was our second day of school, the county burden rate switched from high to very high, which was one of our indicators that we had discussed in previous meetings to lead to mask mandates. Also, what occurred over Labor Day weekend is if you look at, and if you would go to the complete COVID data dashboard, if you go in your Google Drive and just search complete COVID, is the first two words, you'll get the data dashboard that the board has available to them. You'll see that on the 7th of September, which was our first day back, we had 18 student COVID cases. And the significance of that number is at no point the previous school year, and that included staff and students combined, did we ever get over 17. So in the 2020-2021 school year, the highest number of COVID positive students and staff combined that we ever had was 17. So on the 7th, we hit 18 of September. And when I made the decision on Monday of that week, which was Labor Day, we actually had a breakdown of 12 in the elementary schools and 6 in the high schools. Okay, so we had a preponderance of our cases at the elementary level. So that is why I decided to, again, the burden went up to the very high level, which was supposed to be one of the benchmarks we were going to look at for masking in the district, and also 2/3 of our cases at that time were at the elementaries. Now, that's leveled off a little bit. We have 14 today, and of those 14, it's a 7-and-7 split between middle high school and elementary. Now, we still have a few more students in middle and high school, so that still has the percentage being a little bit higher among our elementary students. Interestingly enough, last year we had a number of staff cases, and we haven't had a single staff case yet, so that's good. So we're happy about that. So that's why the decision was made, and as you might imagine, I got all sorts of feedback Tuesday, Wednesday, and a little bit of Thursday last week. And, I actually had spoken to some of the people in the audience here today on both sides of this issue. And ultimately, I had indicated that I had hit some benchmarks that were talked about in previous meetings. And because of that, I made a decision, which is what's specified in the COVID protocols, is that if there's a point in which we have data that suggests that we need to make a change, that I had the authority to make the change until the next board meeting. So that's what I did, and that's why we're here now. So that's where our data's been. Our lowest number of student cases we've had on any one given day so far this year is 12. And 3 out of the 8 days we've been in school, we've had 18, which again, the largest number we had at any point last year, students and staff combined, was 17. So whether people want to acknowledge it or not, our COVID activity is up over last year. Now, that's obviously a result of the Delta variant, but there's no refuting those numbers. Our COVID activity right now is higher than it was last year at this time, and it's just higher because we never hit 18 last year, and we've already had 18 for 3 days. Now, you're also seeing the number of quarantines has increased a little bit. And why is that? Well, typically, when there's a quarantine at the middle or high school level, in exposure to a student, those kids switch classes. And as they switch classes, the number of people who are within, 6 feet of those students increases. So it's very common that a middle or high school student will have more close contacts in a day than an elementary student because they move around more. Middle school has 6 classes, high school has 5. Whereas in a typical day, a student might have their regular homeroom in elementary and maybe 2 specials in a given day. So they just have less traffic. Now, last year, we quarantined entire classes at the elementary level. So if you were in a classroom, didn't matter where you were in proximity to the student that tested positive, everybody was quarantined. This year, we decided to use 6 feet as our guideline, both for elementary and for middle and high school. So our quarantine numbers at the elementary school have been lower per incident or per positive case. I would say on average, about half the students, maybe a little more in a class, are still being quarantined, but there are some students who are able to remain in person in class. So that's what's been going on with our numbers. Another piece of information that's different than when we met in late August is in late August, there were no school districts that had mask mandates at that time. That's changed quite a bit. So the Monday night we were meeting, New Glarus that same night went to pre-K-12 mask mandate that evening. And that's going to continue until the end of September. So New Glarus is pre-K-12 through the end of September. Monticello last week switched to pre-K-12 until the end of September. Blackhawk is pre-K-5. They switched last week. And 612 are masks optional. That's the same way we are right now. Broadhead is pre-K-8 is masks mandated. 912 is optional. And Albany has it on their agenda tonight. So I don't know what Albany is doing this evening. I don't know if anyone's keeping track of the Albany board meeting. I'm not. But I will tell you with complete confidence that it is on their agenda tonight. And Judah is not mandating masks, but I got a text message from Tracy Davis today that says their threshold is mandating masks when 2% of staff and students combined are positive. That's 6 cases in their district. So if and when that happens, which I'm not going to get into their numbers, but they're close, then they will have a mask mandate pre-K-12 because they're all in the same building. So I just want to make it very clear to the board that, there has been a shift. Now, I'm not saying, I think if we, poll the audience, we're going to have very divergent views on that, and I respect that. But I just want to be mindful of what the facts are, that there are still a few Greene County school districts that have mass optional for the upper grades. Right now, Judah and Albany are the only two that don't have mask mandates right now, and I don't know if that will continue beyond this evening. That's where it was coming into the meeting. So I wanted to update you and also the audience on that. I updated the board over the weekend, but I just wanted to have that be part of the discussion. So I guess we'll start out with my recommendation for pre-K 5 and pre-K 6. Looking at the county burden levels, they've actually gone up in the last 2 weeks. Now, for people who follow those numbers, you know that they're a rolling average, kind of a rolling 2-week average. So that means that the change happens slowly. The good news is our numbers have stabilized a bit the last 5 or 6 days as far as new cases in Greene County. Unfortunately, the numbers that we stabilized at were our high numbers, the highest numbers we've seen throughout the summer and into the early fall. So I think our burden is going to stay in the very high level, at least the next 2 weeks. It's possible that, if the numbers start coming down, that burden might be coming down, but I would say in the next 2 weeks that that's going to stay that way. Secondly, and I've said this from the start, and people can debate vaccines and choice and all those things, and no one's ever, we're never going to reach consensus on that. People have divergent views, and that's okay. But ultimately, there is a difference, and there were people on both sides of the issue who were asking the question, well, what's the difference between middle school and high school, and elementary? There's a very big fundamental difference, in my opinion, and that is middle school and high school. People age 12 and up have a choice if they want to get a vaccine. They have that choice. And students under 12 don't have that choice. So then it's incumbent upon us to decide whether we feel that a mask mandate is in the best interest health-wise of those individuals or not. So it's funny when people talk about what the facts are. We get a lot of facts. I get facts from people. Board members get facts from people. We get state, local. Monroe Clinic weighs in. We get a lot of facts. The North Carolina study, which is the largest COVID school study that occurred and that was published this summer, and that was the only study that actually took a very, very large population in the state. The summary of that study is quite simple, is that in North Carolina, there was less transmission of COVID in schools that mandated masks than not, okay? Now, I am not saying that masks, I'm not talking about the efficacy of masks in every single instance. Yes, there are people who wear masks wrong, there are people who wear them right, there's some materials that are better than others. In the end, what it comes down to is, as a board, you need to make a decision on whether we think it's in the best interest health-wise of our students to continue mandating masks for any period of time, and if so, what is the lever, like when is the point when we should reconsider it? I think we should reconsider it. I think we should reconsider it when that burden is off of very high and down to high again, and when we've seen decreasing trends in our schools. Now, I understand that people can have different opinions, but there is no middle ground on this. I've talked to very few people. I've talked to hundreds of people about COVID in this community. Very rarely are they not at one end or the other, and very rarely are they willing to, have some discussion and perhaps move or compromise. That's what makes this very difficult. There was a suggestion that the board doesn't have authority to mandate masks. You absolutely do, without a doubt. You have the legal authority to mandate masks on school property, if you so choose. In fact, nothing in our COVID guidelines hasn't been vetted by our legal counsel. We're all in good standing legally with that. And ethically, if you want to make a change, this is the forum to do it. So my recommendation on masking is, we still are in the very high burden level. I go round and round with, should it be pre-K 5, should it be pre-K 6? I did talk to Brian Boehm, the middle school principal, and I said, well, your sixth graders, by and large, can't be vaccinated. What are your thoughts on extending a mask mandate to sixth grade? He would be in support of that, because that is a more vulnerable population, whereas the 7th and 8th graders do have choice. So my recommendation coming into this meeting is that we hold on till September 27th. That's our next board meeting. That we hold on and look at what's going on with the burden, look at what's going on with our elementary cases in our elementary schools. And my recommendation is that we have a mask mandate pre-K 6 up until the September 27th board meeting. If the board would choose to do that, we wouldn't actually start it in the middle school until Wednesday, because I don't think it's fair to send an email out at 11 o'clock tonight and say all sixth graders need to comply with this. And ultimately, if the board chooses not to do that, then we won't do it. But that's my recommendation for the students that are not of vaccination age.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, we're going to kind of walk through these two possible changes one at a time. So the first one before us is whether or not we continue the mask mandate for pre-K through 5, or if we want to, we follow Rick's recommendation and expand it to pre-K through 6. So,
or eliminate it altogether.
Or eliminate it altogether. So, start. Thoughts from board members?
I guess the data-based approach we decided upon, I think, Rick did the right thing to invoke that. I think, from my perspective, looking at the case counts we have, our goal was to keep kids in school. And I think this is one way to potentially do that. And until the burden rate comes down and our case counts come down, I would totally be in support of that.
Phil?
Well, the dashboard indicates that the case rates are steady to slightly declining. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've had a decline recently. I think, what is it, Thursday? We were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 18, and then we dipped down to 14 active cases. So I would say that's where it is right now. I would say a slight decline. I wouldn't call it a trend yet. We'll see what evolves the rest of the week.
And that's occurring in the elementary schools as well.
Yeah, so our elementary numbers today are 4 plus 2 plus 1. It is a 7 and 7 split today, where it was 12-6 elementary last week when we were unmasked. Not that, again, I'm just giving you the data.
So I guess I would support PK 5 until our next regular board meeting, but not PK 6. That's my position.
Good. Cheryl, any thoughts?
Well, I know our chart had changed from the original chart we had to. So like you said, if it was steady and very high, we were going to not mask too originally. I know we didn't vote on this, we just kind of changed it. So I was okay with the way we had it. I'm looking at the professional staff surveys. I know the staffs said the staff was 100%, the professional staff was 100% comfortable with their decision to wear or not wear a mask. I don't know if they feel the same way about the students. That's not in here, but maybe I would assume so, maybe not. But I think my vote is going to stay the same as optional right now, but I could change my mind next time with the way the numbers are, if something changes.
Okay. Terry?
Hey, Rich, can you repeat what they're saying, because we can't hear them.
Okay.
Yeah, we all probably need to speak up.
Yeah, sorry.
So, I believe Phil had expressed that he would be in support of pre-K 5, but not pre-K 6.
Okay.
And Cheryl would like to keep it optional and wait and reevaluate at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Terry.
So I thought about this a lot over the weekend, and I actually reached out to 4 different elementary teachers and support staff to try to just get a heads up of what they saw last week with the kids and wearing the mask. Across the board, they all said that the kids were not having any issues with the mask. They were glad to be back in school. They were glad to be with their friends. If they needed additional time off with mask, they would come and ask them. And they did extra breaks outside. None of this, we can all agree on one thing. We all wish COVID would just go away or just didn't happen.
Right.
So, but with what's going on, we have choices. We have to make choices. And the choices is to either send kids to school with masks to keep them as safe as possible. And if you're not comfortable with that, to pull and go to Jedi at the beginning of the year. So with wearing 2 hats, being a parent is one hat, and then being a school board member is another hat, your ideas and thoughts can be a little conflicted with each other. But today I sit up here and I have to think as a school board member. And as a school board member, our first and foremost is to A, give the kids an education and to keep them safe. So with that, I would be inclined to go with the pre-K 5.
How are you feeling, Dylan?
Yeah, I think definitely pre-K 5 with where the numbers are and the inability to be vaccinated. I could see pre-K through 6 as well if it could be managed. I just don't know how well that would go with the mixture of grades where some are mandated and some aren't. So I'm just kind of a little concerned about that.
And that was one of the concerns originally when we separated it by building.
Yeah.
So. And again, board members, if you could just try to project a little bit more than usual. We do have tabletop microphones here, but it is a big space, so.
How you feeling, Dan?
I also had conversations with a few elementary staff, and they all said the same as what they told Terry. Maybe we talked to the same people, I don't know. But I think my feedback from a lot of them is they want to do anything possible to stay in school. And kids 12 and under, they don't have that choice. And if they get quarantined, they're out 10 days or 14 days or 10 days, I guess it's 10 days. And that's a big setback for them. And again, kids 12 and older have that choice. And I guess if they don't want to take the vaccine and they're out home, out with the quarantine, I guess partly it is on them and the family. But I have a 9-year-old that this qualifies for. He doesn't have a problem wearing the mask, and I think what we found last year, we didn't really have any problems with kids wearing masks K through 12 really until the very, very end of the year when it got hot and really started that, even the debate started getting hot at that point. And you know, is it parent driven? I don't know, but I think that I continually think through this and I see the numbers and I'm concerned about the numbers and I keep adjusting my position. Right now, to tonight, I would be voting pre-K through 6 because those kids don't have a choice. If there was a motion on the table for pre-K through 12, I probably would vote for it, for mandating masks. That's where I'm at.
You'd vote for pre-K through 12? Even.
If there was a motion on the table, I would vote in favor of mandating masks pre-K through 12. Even that's not, I know that's controversial. but I'm seeing the Delta variant, what Rick talked about, the numbers are higher. I'm nervous about it. But right now I can understand leaving it those 12 and under grades.
I think that's where we would differ then for the, I think the 12 and up, they have choice. I think we're always going to have our portion of our society, a demographic that will not ever get this vaccine. And so I think at some point we have to make choices that are going to be for the good of the district. We have to keep kids in school, but we have to keep things moving. That being said, though, I have always said I am pro-choice until the numbers dictate differently. And when we have numbers, we've given Rick the authority to take us in and out of plan. And I think we're there right now. I think that's evident also by all of our surrounding districts making that same choice. We have choices at home. I've heard a lot tonight, and I've had many articles sent to me, many videos sent to me. There are supplements, there are all these vitamins. I get it, I hear you, and that's fantastic. Not every kid has that opportunity, though. Not every family can afford to do those things, and so I feel like we need to do what we can inside our district, and even if they can't afford a mask, we can provide a mask. And we can debate all day long, all night long, the efficacy of them, but I feel like it is one step we can do until these kids have choice. Once they have choice for vaccine, I feel like it's got to be optional going forward. But right now, we don't have the choice, and the numbers are dictating that we need to be more careful. And I'm struggling with the 6th. I'm struggling with the 6th grade only because I don't want to see them. They don't have that choice yet, but I think it's going to be difficult. So I think right now I would be comfortable staying with pre-K 5 is where my vote would be, at least until our next meeting.
And I echo some of that. I would, when we look at our county burden, we look at what we did last year. Again, I know it's controversial. I know people aren't going to agree. I do feel like one thing that the board has done, I think and Rick has done a good job of watching the data, making recommendations, making changes when needed, and his recommendation right now is a pre-K 6 mask mandate. I would support that. I also agree that I can see how 6th grade would be difficult. So if it's pre-K 5 and continuing that, that's fine. Especially when our burden's this high and we're looking at all of this other data that we've said we'd be looking at. And I think Rick has done a great job adjusting and watching that and making recommendations that reflect our current situation. Do you know, Rick, the number of, when you broke it up into elementary and middle high school, is there a breakup between like middle high school grade? I mean, are we seeing?
Right, we're actually seeing, so my answer to that today is different than where we were trending. So our middle school has averaged either 3 or 4 active cases since we started. High school's had 2 days at 5, but about 5 days at 3. So that high school's fluctuated a little bit more. They started with more cases that were even before school started. The high school had 5 active cases the first day of school, so obviously none of those were, cases that people got at school. So I would say right now the averages, if I would average them across the board, they would probably end up 3.75 per building on an average. But please remember the high school has 1 more grade than the middle school. So percentage-wise, the percentages are a little higher at the middle school level. I will say that of the middle school cases, there are more in 6th grade than 7th or 8th grade. Again, it's pretty early. I'd feel a lot more comfortable drawing conclusions with 3 or 4 months of data. But I do want people to understand, like, when I talk to people, there's some people who don't believe COVID is really a real condition. And then there's some people who feel it's a condition, but we're overreacting. And I understand the overreaction piece. I don't understand that it's not a real condition. It is concerning, though, that we have 3 totals that exceeded any day we had last year in September. Because my concern is what's that going to look like in December or January? Because there's no refuting. The highest number we ever had last year was 17. at any one given time. We have a whole year of data for that, and not a single case gets by us because we get notification from every single person who tests positive who works for us or, is, had a positive test. I will also tell you, we had 47 people sick in the high school today. That's a high number for September. Usually we see half of that, if even. Jeremy would have a better sense of that, but, usually we don't see a lot of illness in September. Having 47 students out, this is real, okay? So like anybody who's suggesting that it isn't, stop it. It's not helpful to the process. But, I understand the complexity of sixth grade. That's why I didn't recommend it originally. But I wanted to put it on the table just because it is a group that can't be vaccinated at this point, and they don't have choice in that matter. So, Rich, I think you want to share your thoughts, and then ultimately, at some point, somebody could make a motion. I would like to make one more, or share one more idea before we would make a motion. That would be all right with you.
Understood. So where I'm feeling today, and I've got a first grader and a fifth grader and an eighth grader, so I have some kids that are in these affected grade levels. Where I'm feeling today is that folks who are 12 and older have choice to get vaccinated. They have the ability to go out and decide if they want an enhanced immunity or ability to protect themselves from COVID that kids under the age of 12 do not have today. At that point, I feel that's the point where it goes from a true choice to sort of a false choice. And then, therefore, is incumbent on us to do something to try to ensure that those kids can stay in school as long as possible, as much as possible. So I think for those folks that are under the age of 12, my position would be that we would mask for those ages, so it would be pre-K 6, in my view, that we would do that with the understanding that our middle school administration has said that that is an operationally feasible thing for them to do. So that's where I would be today.
So listening to, and I don't know if I calculated this right, but it seemed like it was about a 50-50 split on pre-K 5 or pre-K 6. One thing the board could do is you actually could break this down into 3 motions. You could make a motion on continuing pre-K 5 through September 27th, which was recommended. And then you could vote separately on 6th grade. That might be, based on what I've heard from you, that might be an approach to look at. And then we would talk about 7th through 12th grade separately. I know that a couple people said that maybe we should consider a pre-K 12 motion. I decided to break it down into what do we currently have a motion for, and then discuss the other issue as a separate issue. But that would be my recommendation, because it sounds like from the information that I've heard that there seems to be at least some desire to continue this until the September 27th board meeting, when we can look at it again. And then maybe take the 6th grade separately. That's just an idea. You're the president, and ultimately that's your choice.
Yep. So when I'm looking at this, if we do a pre-K through 5 and we have that as a motion and we vote on it, let's say it passes, and then we do a separate 6th grade and it doesn't pass, does that then remove your ability to make a decision? Let's say a week down the road, we've got a huge spike in 6th grade because we said that you have the autonomy to say, not only this building, but this grade, but,
Well, and the COVID
I wanna make
protocols,
sure we're not.
my interpretation of the COVID protocols is I have a choice until the next meeting. And that's exactly what we're doing here, is you're acting on it as a full board at the next meeting, and, and then we'll reevaluate on the 27th. Now, I do want to make sure that as we look at this, that we keep up with the data. And I would encourage people, regardless of how you feel about this, keep an eye on the data dashboard. We publish it for a reason, and everybody has access to it. And you're able to see the same data the board's able to see by and large. So ultimately, that's our discussion point as we move along. Plus, we're also looking at that county burden level. The good news is in the school district of Monroe, the numbers are coming down a little bit. Unfortunately, the county as a whole has pretty much stayed kind of where it is. That's why the recommendation I have is, structured as such. So to answer your question, no. I mean, I still could make a change for a given level, and I'll just give an example. I mean, if we're at, 15 cases in the high school next week, I might end up doing the same thing, until the next board meeting. I look at it every day. I look at it multiple times a day. And, ultimately, I'm trying to fulfill the will of the board based on the language that you've approved.
Okay.
I think that's...
Go ahead. No, I was just going to ask a clarifying question. With the middle school numbers, do we know in these middle school numbers how many of them are sixth graders versus not?
Yeah, we don't publish that on the webpage because once you start getting down to numbers like 1 and 2, people can kind of start figuring out who they are.
Sure. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I do have, yes, I have it broken down by grade.
I mean, do we have a bigger issue with sixth grade? That might
I think it's too early to tell.
Okay.
But I would say that certainly it's every bit as proportional as the other 2 grades, and
okay.
So
all right.
That's something we're continuing to look at.
Okay.
I was going to say, I'm just glad you asked that. I think that's important to make sure that Rick has the authority. If you're
Right.
saying there's 47 kids out at the high school, if there is something, I want to make sure that you have the authority to make decisions, because I also agree that you're looking at this every minute of every day.
Right.
And ultimately, we all want to keep our kids safe, and we want to keep them in school. We want to keep them with their teachers as much as we possibly can.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to ask for is a motion, if somebody would like to make one, to mandate masks at pre-K 5, and then I will ask for a separate motion for 6th grade.
Okay. Do you want to include the September 27th date, or do you want?
Yes, so we'll include the September 27th date. We'll revisit it again. We'll have another recommendation from Rick at that meeting. And at that point, we may be able to derive some trends as well, so. Is that acceptable? Okay, so if somebody would like to make the motion, I'd be willing to entertain it for a mandate of masks at pre-K 5 until the September 27th board meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, so I've got Cheryl and then Phil for a second?
No, I think it was Terry.
Oh, was it Terry? I'm sorry.
Terry for the first, and what?
Tim, were you?
Who made the motion? Phil made the motion?
I kind of did at the same time.
Okay. You guys.
They tied, I
All
guess.
right.
I don't know.
Okay, so Terry and Phil?
Terry and Phil, all right.
Do you have Phil as the second then?
I do.
Okay.
And this is pre-K through 5 only?
That is
We're doing a roll
correct.
call vote?
Yep, roll call vote.
Okay. So Dan Bardoff?
Yes.
Rich Depre?
Yes.
Terry Ellefson?
Yes.
Teresa Keen?
Yes.
Nikki Matley, yes. Cheryl McGuire?
No.
Dylan McGuire?
Yes.
Phil Vosberg?
Yes.
Tim Wolf?
Yes.
Okay?
Okay, motion carries. I would entertain a motion to mandate masks for 6th grade until September 27th.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Dan and a second by Tim. Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
Yep, hang on a second. Tim seconded, right?
Yes.
Sorry, all right. Dan Bardoff?
Yes.
Rich Depre?
Yes.
Terry Ellison?
Yes.
Teresa Keen?
Yes.
Nikki Matley, yes. Cheryl McGuire?
No.
Dylan McGuire?
Yes.
Phil Vosberg?
No.
and Tim Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
That's 7-2, correct?
Yes. Okay, so the next item that we'll take up is whether or not we will have a mandate for masks in grades 7 through 12. So we can have some discussion about this. Ultimately, if we make no motion, then everything stays the same, nothing changes. We would only make a motion if, a motion and a second if anybody would like to mandate 7 through 12.
To clarify, Rick, your recommendation is that that's not necessary at this time? It's
Yeah,
completely
well,
optional?
I didn't make that recommendation. I made it to the board in their notes, but I'll make it to the audience watching the meeting. No, that's a good question. So, yeah, my motion or my recommendation is that we keep it optional in grades 7 through 12. There's two major reasons for this. Number one, people do have choice of whether they are vaccinated. And again, I'm not going to get into the debate about vaccinations. The reality is if you're age 12 and above, you're eligible. You and your family have made that choice, and then ultimately I feel that the necessity to have that level of protection now is not as urgent based on the numbers. Continuing to monitor them with concern. But, you know, the other piece about our middle and especially high school students is their mobility outside of classroom is much greater than the mobility of our younger students. They make their own decisions about travel. They make their own decisions about where they're going. Without a doubt, students above the age of 12 are more mobile than students below the age of 12. So my threshold there is a little bit higher. Ultimately, because they do have choice in the matter, and some people have made choices not to be vaccinated, and I completely respect that. But ultimately, that also comes with a greater susceptibility to transmission and testing positive or having more severe symptoms. And ultimately, that's why my recommendation is that we're going to keep it optional. And we don't have to make a motion because that's the current condition. So the only way we'd have to make a motion is if we were going to mandate masks 7-12. So that's my recommendation at this time.
Any additional conversation, comments? Okay. If somebody would like to make a motion, I would entertain it.
I would make a motion to mandate it. Grades 7 through 12 until September 27th.
I'll second it.
Got a motion by Dan and a second by Tim. Any additional discussion? Okay. Nikki, would you call the roll, please?
You bet. Dan Bardoff.
Yes.
Rich Jeffrey.
No.
Terry Ellison.
Yes.
Sorry, she said yes.
Yes.
Teresa Keen.
No.
Nikki Matley, no. Cheryl McGuire.
No.
Dylan McGuire.
No.
Phil Vosberg.
No.
Tim Wolf.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
3-6.
Okay. All right. Move on now to item F. It is a discussion on potential action on the SOAR coordinator posting.
All right, so as you may remember, we had discussed, I believe it was the first meeting in August, it might have been the last meeting in July, I'm not sure which one, but at one of those meetings, we decided to post for a SOAR coordinator, and we had given it 20 hours a week, $25 an hour, and we posted that part-time position, and Jeremy Jackson's joining us at this time. And what we found was that we didn't have the applicant pool we had hoped for. So I'm going to turn things over to Joe and Jeremy, and they're going to talk about this. And we're going to run an idea by the board that you could take action on now, or you could table it until the next meeting. But we do think we may have to offer a greater position in order to get the kind of applicants that we're looking for. So Joe, or you going to lead off?
Sure. Rick did a good job of giving you an overview of where we're currently at with this position. For those of you that may not be as familiar with the SOAR program, this This really started back in, I think it was February of 2018. We really saw a need for someone that can reach out to the community, facilitate partnerships, create an opportunity for us to really connect with the businesses and serve not only our kids, but look to ways at which we can support our businesses. And certainly everyone's aware right now that businesses are struggling to find employees that fit their needs, and we believe that this is one position that could really meet the needs of our kids, our district, and our community. For those of you that aren't aware, this position was previously built into Kim Schaff's position. Kim just left her district to take an opportunity in Sun Prairie, but previously she was our technology and learning coach. We approached her with this idea. Being the great person that she is, she said, sure, I'm willing to take this on. She carved out some time within her position and did a great job of moving this along. The reality is, this is a full-time position that was being served in a part-time manner. If you think about it, we have 700 kids in our high school, roughly, all of which are in about the last 4 years of their academic career with us. We're trying to prepare them for life after high school. And I'd have a hard time thinking of a position that wouldn't be more impactful than creating a liaison that will help them find their path beyond high school. And, you know, Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about the numbers of the program and where we were and where we're currently at. I think that's a reflection of the amount of time that we've been able to dedicate to it recently. And you know, for me, I just think there's a lot of opportunities. And basically what we're proposing is that we create a full-time SOAR coordinator position that would be an exempt staff position that would allow us to do some things that are fairly creative, including using some of our support staff to serve as job coaches out into the community, working with kids, including kids with special needs, to prepare them for life after high school and make sure that they're successful contributing members of the community. And you know, I'm hopeful that the board will give this thoughtful consideration because I'm really excited about the potential for this program. Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about the SOAR program, the numbers in terms of where we're at a high point, where we're at now, including youth apprenticeship?
Yep, so we used to, with work experience, this encapsulates 3 different areas. Work experience where just students are going out and have a job and they get credit for that. There's really no competencies or things that they go over with their employer. Then it goes up to a youth apprenticeship where they actually have competencies and career pathways, things that they have to do for those apprenticeship areas. And then our internship program, which is what we've been working to set up with businesses where they identify an area within their business or industry, and then they have a supervisor there, and then we also have meetings with the supervisor and the students and their families, and a common understanding of what we want them to accomplish within that. And that is also a paid position, plus they get credit. So it's pretty lucrative to the kids. Like I said, normally in that workplace, their work experience alone, we have 50 to 60 students. Right now, we only have 17 for this year. We think that's a little bit reflective of the COVID situation we've been in, and also the fact that when Kim was working on this previously, she was able to devote a lot more time to it. As you can imagine, last year, a lot of her time shifted to being a pre-K-12 help resource for technology within the district. So it wasn't as much time associated with this program, although she did an amazing job with it, with handling all of it. We currently have 10 students in youth apprenticeships, which is about where we normally are, and then we also have 10 students in the SOAR internships. So overall, right now, we have 37. Usually, like I said, we're closer to that 70 to 80 students. But our hope with this is that we grow it. We have had conversations with lots of different businesses and industries in the town, and even outside of town, that want students, that really want kind of a pathway for students to get exposed to their careers, to their jobs that they have. And on our end too, we want to give our students a better experience and give them a leg up. I mean, imagine if we could build a program here that have multitudes of pathways for students to have a leg up when they get out of high school. So they not only learned about general things in high school, but they also got to apply them and see what they actually do in the businesses and the industries in our area. That for me would be huge. I think for the kids too, So the person that's in this job, you know, they're not only working with the industries and the businesses in town, they're actually a salesman too for the kids. So we have to get kids to want to do this, to give up other things in their, you know, why would I do this, which potentially is harder, right, even though they get paid, than take like, you know, a different class that they could take or whatever. But we're going to have to get someone who's going to work with the families, work with the kids, also work with the businesses to promote and make this larger, and I think we can. And the big thing for me, besides that better experience, better credentials, would be relevance. We always say, why is high school relevant to kids? Well, this would create a lot of relevance. If we could not only have, let's say, business classes, but then have them in a job where they see exactly why they're learning what they are and being able to apply it. I mean, that, if we can get, like I said, those multitude of different pathways and then show them the relevance of what we're learning in high school, then they can start to connect those dots of why we're doing what we're doing. So if we could make this bigger, I mean, that would be our goal, is to have many more pathways, many more students involved in it. I think it only benefits our community and benefits our school.
So just a couple things to wrap this up, and then the board can certainly ask any questions that you'd like. In board docs, there's a document that provides bullet points related to the roles and responsibilities, but I'll just quickly run through them. You know, we would propose that this position would address student enrollment, participation in the SOAR program, as Jeremy just detailed, facilitate relationships with area businesses that are currently participating in the program, establish new partnerships with area businesses that are interested. One example of that is we're really interested in working closely with the Monroe Clinic. We feel like there's a multitude of opportunities there. The reality is Kim didn't have the time to dig into that as much as we would have liked. I think there's some interest from Monroe Clinic. In fact, I know there is because I've had those conversations with them. But in order to do that the right way, we need to have someone to lead the charge on that and continue that communication. Supervise some paraprofessionals that might be serving as job coaches, as I mentioned previously, assist with the youth apprenticeship placements, and then other duties as assigned as we continue to develop this program. I do think it's worth noting that there are a couple model programs out there. Milton is close to us, and they have a similar program with a full-time school-to-work coordinator that is able to facilitate an amazing program. And it's something that they hold up as one of the most celebrated programs in their community. And I think that this has the potential to be a similar experience for our district and our community. And then the final thing I want to note, and it's in the write-up, is that we could cover this with costs that were already built into the budget. A significant portion of this could come from a position that was just reduced. We had a certified occupational therapy assistant position that, after working with Rick and Ron, we decided that we could eliminate that position. Karen Hudson retired at the end of last year. We looked at the numbers. We were able to go without that position successfully. And if we were to add that to the dollar amount that was approved for a SOAR coordinator stipend, we think that we have enough funds to provide a total package that could bring someone through the door that could really bring something special to the kids, the schools, and just as importantly, our community. Because if you talk to our businesses, they need assistance in finding great people, and we're one of the only places that they can go to that potentially has the ability to offer some options for them. So again, we couldn't be more excited about this. We'd be happy to answer your questions, and I'll turn it over to you, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, the one comment I would like to make before the board starts asking questions is, please understand that we did post this as a part-time position, and we just didn't get the quality of applicants that we need to serve this program. And they also didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the knowledge of the local business community. So we just don't think we're going to get the kind of person we need unless we offer, you know, when you're talking about $75,000 annually for total package, you're probably looking at a salary in the 40s or low 50s with benefits. So it's not like it's not anything close to an administrative salary. And we may have people applying who don't have four-year college degrees. They might have technical school training or, an associate's degree or something like that. And it wouldn't be necessary, but we're not getting the kind of applicant we need offering a part-time position. So that's what it really comes down to.
Rick, I think it's important to know that we did have applicants. It was just we want to be sure to do this right. You know,
Right.
someone really has to have knowledge of this community and, people and connections even. That would be great, right? But then also knowledge of kids in schools. I mean, that's important too, to know, what is going to be lucrative to them, how schools work. I mean, how they can manage that between the businesses and school. And we may not find that person. We may have to coach them up a bit on that, but it would, we want to get the right person. We don't want to just be hasty and get a person.
Can you explain the 210-day contract? Is this not a yearly position, is it?
I didn't hear the
Can you
question.
repeat
Yeah,
that?
you can't hear you down there.
So Cheryl asked about the 210-day contract, and is this not a union position, right, Cheryl?
Year-long,
A
I think
yearly.
is what you said. Yeah. Well, there's 188 contract days for
It's a
professional
school year
staff.
plus some extra days.
About a week at the front and back end.
Yeah, because we know there's be some summer work, but maybe not a full summer.
But not like a full-time employee?
Right, not like an administrator.
And then I have another question on that. With the exempt, I had asked this at the last time we brought him an exempt position, because I know Rick said he was trying to get away with those, so I'm asking that again, and especially since it's not a true full-year position.
Well, we have some exempt, our athletic director is not a full-year position. So we do have some exempt positions that aren't full years. So the reason is, quite frankly, we can only offer a professional staff contract to somebody who has a professional license. So they can't be in the professional staff group unless they have a DPI license. So exempt is our only option if we're going to pay salary. We can't have a salaried support staff because we don't have that as an option. So this person could supervise aides that would assist in the job in supporting students at their jobs. So that's where Strive comes in, and that's where some of the other, we may need to call on an aide to support a student at a workplace site. So that's certainly where the supervision of staff would come for an exempt. But the reality, Cheryl, is that this can't be a professional staff position without somebody having a professional license from DPI.
So what kind of, you talk about a unique skill set, what are you looking for? Or what kind of degree or position, or what does Milton have? What are you looking for in a person?
Yeah, I can't speak to exactly who Milton hired and their background. Jeremy might know that.
I said, what skill set are you looking for? Like what degree or what qualifications are you looking for? What does Milton have in their position?
Yeah, I think Milton would be willing to be a good resource for them. I haven't reached out to what their if she has a certain degree or anything. I don't think we're looking for a certain degree. We're working for somebody who is going to sell the program, going to be a good PR person, work with people, right? Because that's really what they have to do, is really work with people. They're going to have to go out and talk to businesses. They're going to have to talk to families. They're going to have to talk to kids. So that's really the qualities that we're looking for. It would be great if they had knowledge of schools and how schools operate. It would be great if they had knowledge of this community. And like I said, maybe some contacts or people they could go to, because that takes some time. If you're not from here, you're going to need to go out and talk to people and get them to trust you and believe that when we say this is what we want to do, and that we'll follow through with that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that they're going to be a people person and be able to work with people.
If we were to post this or approve this tonight, what's the time frame? Are we looking at filling something in December, or are we looking for like the next summer or next school
Hopefully
year?
as soon as possible.
Yeah.
As soon as possible.
We would have to prorate. I mean, there's no question that
Well, I
we
don't
would be
care about
looking at a
that,
prorated contract this year. But yeah, we'd like to get somebody in. What are we doing now, Jeremy? I think the board needs to know,
So the board.
what we're doing now is not sustainable.
It's me and Mr. Saunders, and then a combination of other people that might help behind the scenes too, but mainly the contact people are me and Dan Saunders. He takes care of a lot of the youth apprenticeship stuff. The other stuff, I've been taking care of other questions that the businesses may have. They come to me now.
And I'm guessing you're getting a lot of demand. I mean, you would if you had this.
Yeah, and actually, I think we could fill more if we had a more stable position or person in that position. We're just not willing to, I know that Stoughton Trailer and Grande Cheese and some others really would like this. We just haven't went back to them because I don't know that we have the ability or the resources to take more on right now with how we're doing it.
I appreciate that this is something that you took pause with and really reflected and didn't just take someone. Because this is a really, really awesome thing that we're trying to do here, and I think this has really tremendous potential. So I'm excited that we're looking at making this a full-time person. So that part's really exciting to me. I think it's important, though, I know we maybe don't know exactly what we're looking for, but I think we really need to kind of hone in on what we're looking for, right? And so obviously reaching out to Milton or really thinking through this, but then also really thinking through how we're going to gauge the effectiveness of this person. Especially if we're going to take someone and then have to groom them into the role. We're going to have some benchmarks, and I don't know what those are yet, but I'm just excited that we didn't just jump and fill it with the wrong person, because that could sour a lot of the already amazing relationships we have, and what's already working about it. So thank you for not jumping the gun and for reflecting on that first.
I agree. I think it's always important to find the right person.
Yep.
And I think this is a great position, and I think there's a huge potential, so it's exciting.
Yes,
So-
I think that's something we need, so the sooner the better.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. And the easy benchmarks for me are, the number of placements, right? The number of students involved, and the number of opportunities that we have.
Yep.
But reaching out to Milton is needed to be done too, because are there other things that they're using? It's not just number of placements, maybe it's the successful outcomes of those placements.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. What are,
And there was a lot of that information that was collected previously by Kim. Unfortunately, she took a lot of program knowledge with her. Fortunately, we all have a great relationship with Kim still, and she's willing to help us out at any time. I think the reality is, and going back to the earlier question, is this is a critical program that's underserved right now. And I think what we know from last year's experiences, if we don't invest in it, the kids won't be invested. And so we need to do everything within our power to get this up and rolling, because this literally has the ability to change lives for kids and keep some great kids in our community, which we all know is something that is a goal of ours.
Yeah, and this is an absolutely critical role within the district. If we're looking longer term and we're thinking about declining enrollment and how are we keeping kids, families, people in the district here in Monroe, exposing them to the opportunities that are in the district is critically important. And you guys mentioned that program at Milton several times, and the lady who runs it, I'm on the Blackhawk Tech Board. She was an interim on the Blackhawk Tech Board for a year. The things that they do at Milton are absolutely lockstep with post-secondary education. So she is in lockstep with everything that's going on at Blackhawk. They have an amazing resource, the AMTC that Blackhawk Tech built in Milton. That's not to say that we can't take advantage of that. Blackhawk will put our kids on buses and send them there. They'll learn how to weld and they'll come back. But the reason it's important to be lockstep with them is because there's a gap between when we get them that real experience during high school and then they need to turn it into a marketable skill. It's not something that we provide here yet. So bridging that gap so that if they need somebody who can weld at Monroe Truck and we send them over to Monroe Truck for a semester, we need to have a pathway for them and have it be turnkey and say, okay, well, go talk to this person at Blackhawk Tech. You're already enrolled. Perhaps it's dual credit with us. We're just putting you on a transport and you're going to AMTC and that's what the last couple hours of your day is. Or it's you finish school here and you get on the bus and you head over there and you do it. But it's absolutely critical that we fill that gap. So I agree 100%. It's got to be a full-time individual. It's got to be somebody with a knowledge of our community and the opportunities that are there. But they've got to reach out to those post-secondary schools because it's got to be a cohesive program, or it'll fall down when they leave our doors. And that's not how we're going to best serve them. For me, when you're talking about this, we have, one of the reasons I'm sitting here is because we need to provide opportunities for our kids. This specifically provides those opportunities. It matches opportunities to their aptitude and their desire. It's exactly what we're supposed to be doing at every level. So I'm very much in support of it. As far as the cost is concerned, I don't know if it helps, instead of thinking of this as it's X number of dollars per year, this is this is an immersive experience for X number of students. This means that we will retain X number of students in the community to help grow our community and make it a stronger and better place to live. So thinking of it in terms of what it provides instead of this is going to be $70,000 a year out of a, $29 million budget. That helps me rationalize that a little bit more. I don't know if that helps anybody else, but.
Well, and so Kim, the person who did this previously, was a technology coach, and she also had a professional license. So to answer Cheryl's question, and Cheryl brings up a very good question, and that is, if somebody has a professional license, could they be professional staff? The answer is absolutely they could.
Okay.
But the problem right now is we need somebody now. And I don't know if we're in a position where we can find, if somebody who's in our current teacher ranks applied for the job, we would have to cross that bridge if and when we came to it. Because maybe they could be professional staff and be under a professional license. But right now, all we know is posting this as a part-time hourly job, we didn't get the kind of applicants we need. So I guess I'd like to post it this way. If people are interested who have a professional license, it might be in our best interest, Cheryl, to make them professional staff. But we don't know until we post the job. I do know, I do know some support staff in our district who would like to apply for this job if it was full-time. They saw it posted when it was part-time, they're just like, I need a full-time job, not a part-time job. So, I think there will be some interest. So.
Rick, we're asking to add a position, right? So that's kind of why it's in front of the board?
That's why it's in front of the board. The board approved, a part-time stipend, and we didn't get the quality of applicant we wanted. So ultimately, we do need the board to either do one of two things. I think either you take action on it tonight, and if you don't feel comfortable and you want to wait till next meeting, we can take action next meeting. But that's going to delay our process 2 weeks.
And one thing that Joe indicated as we were getting rid of another position, do we have to make that part of our motion? Or do you just go back?
Well, we don't need the position. I guess we could make a motion to eliminate a position that we've already decided we don't need.
Well, but you could always fill it at any time. That's kind of why we do some of these motions.
Yeah, certainly I'm fine with, if the board feels that that's a more transparent, way to account for dollars, that would be fine. I think the board could make a motion to eliminate the certified occupational therapy assistant position, eliminate that position due to low program numbers, and then a second motion to approve the posting of this job, if you want to account for money. And I think that there might be some wisdom to that.
That would be my preference.
Okay, I'd entertain.
I would make a
motions you'd like
motion
to
to eliminate the certified COTA. COTA position, part-time position?
Or second.
That's full-time position.
Full-time.
Full-time position?
Yeah.
Okay, full-time, sorry.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Dan and a second by Phil to eliminate that position. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Looking for a
I'll
second
move
motion.
to approve the $75,000 position for a SOAR position.
You move to approve the SOAR position?
Move to
Full-time
approve
SOAR?
the SOAR position.
I'll second that.
The SOAR position.
Okay.
As described.
Okay, I've got a motion by Phil and a second by Nikki to approve the SOAR position as described.
And again, that is for the 200-day contract, right?
210 is what we have now.
I didn't hear everything, so I'm just trying to make sure.
And when the board sees this on a consent agenda item, if anything changes due to this, we'll fully inform you. Like if we find a professional staff and we can make it a professional staff contract, we'll consider that. If the person doesn't have a professional license, exempt is really our only option because we don't have a lane and a collective bargaining agreement with the support staff for this position. So that really is our only real option, but we'll keep you posted if we find somebody.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table to approve the SOAR position for a 210-day contract.
I seconded it.
Yep, I've got Phil with Nikki as a second.
Okay.
All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. And once we get this rolling, we'll definitely get this position in person on a board agenda so we can provide more detail regarding the work. But thank you, we appreciate it.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right, we're on to boardsmanship and administration. I don't have anything for boardsmanship.
Well, I have one thing, just as a reminder, and I know it seems like a million miles away, and several board members and potentially several conversations about COVID-19 away, but the WASB convention is coming around in January, which is typically a 3-day event, and it is January 19 through 21 of 22. And I know that Cindy's already reserved some rooms for the people who need to be there Tuesday night for sure. So usually it's in October where, Cindy, isn't that correct? Usually the first meeting in October, people have to decide whether they're going. So sometimes board members come Tuesday night, sometimes they come Wednesday in the morning, but it's the 19th through the 21st. And for those of you who haven't gone, it is a wonderful event. Amidst COVID or not, right now they are confident they're going to run it. Whether masks will be required at the event or not, we probably won't know until a week or two before. I went to a superintendent's gathering in late July that wasn't masked, and I have one next week that's masked. So I think we just have to be flexible, but check your calendars, and then maybe by the October board meeting, let Cindy know if you're planning on going so we can get rooms for everybody and get everyone registered. Cindy, anything else to add about the WASB convention?
Repeat the dates you need to know by again. Repeat the date you need to know by again.
Actually, it's the October. I'll give you the meeting, Cheryl. It's October. We need to know by October 11th.
October 11th.
Columbus Day.
With that, also what days you're thinking? Because some people don't go all the days of the
Sure. So the convention is January 19th, 20th, and 21st. I think, Nikki, you're still our WASB delegate, so you typically come Tuesday evening. Board members typically come Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning. Sometimes people stay till Friday, sometimes people go home Thursday night. Basically, you just let Cindy know what your plans are and we accommodate them.
Okay.
And if you're a new board member and you want to know more about what it's about, give me a call and I can give you all sorts of details. It's very worthwhile.
It is really good.
It is. That's great. Okay, Board of Education correspondence. To my knowledge, all correspondence we've received have had a reply or an acknowledgement tonight during public comment. So I don't have any correspondence outside of the COVID correspondence we were all fairly familiar with. Committee reports. We'll go around. Dylan, do you have anything?
No.
Dan?
The only thing I would say is I don't mind if we meet here, but I don't know if we can arrange the tables more so we're more looking at each other, because I can't hear that side of the table.
It's very hard to
Maybe I'm
hear
old or something.
No, I can't either. So you're old, I am too.
Well, we're all old.
But it's difficult. I just want to say it's really difficult to hear a lot of the comments down there at that end of the table.
Well, I took a count of the number of people we had here tonight. It was less than we had at the previous meeting.
Okay.
So I think we're going to be going back to the Bauer Center. We erred on the side of caution, but we certainly could have accommodated this group in the Bauer Center. So, thanks, Dan. I was thinking the same thing.
Thank you, Dan. Nikki?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Teresa?
Todd has looked at dates for curriculum to meet and has coordinated them with the first meeting of the month. So curriculum, instead of a separate Monday, will meet in conjunction with the regular board meetings. Thank you.
The first one will be the 11th, and then that will be at 5 o'clock because we have policy.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Tim?
Nothing today.
Phil?
Nothing for me.
Cheryl?
Nothing.
Terry?
Nothing.
Okay. Any agenda items for future discussion from board members?
I don't know if this is an agenda item, but, you know, one of the questions I guess maybe we could have some discussion on is, I was fortunate enough to have a child go through quarantine. And I know we can't do virtual learning this year because of the burden, but, you know, just seeing the quarantine numbers and seeing what my kid did for 6 days, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's got to be some more thought around what do we do when we have these quarantines and what level of education or preparation can we do so that kids have something to do. So I don't know if that's a agenda item or that's just something we need to talk about as part of COVID, because I just see those quarantine numbers, and if we had 112 students, that I'm sure there's varying levels and degrees based on the teacher, but if they're all having that type of experience, I would get concerned, because I think we're going to continue to see those bigger numbers.
And then if they have more than one and you're out that many more days, I agree.
Yeah, and live instruction's not sustainable, but I understand what you're saying, and I think we can have all of our principals speak to that at our next meeting.
I think the one thing to keep in mind is in the first 2 weeks of the school year, and a lot of the things that happen have to be done in person because you just haven't met the students yet to get some of those routines and things in place. So I anticipate some of those virtual options would look a little bit different in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify that too, I agree with you, Tim, that's been my concern is what happens to these quarantine kids. But just so we are clear, if people aren't bringing their kids because they don't like that they have to wear a mask, that's the choice they're making. I don't want to be stressing our teachers to try to accommodate
We agree with
that.
you, and we're getting requests to accommodate
I
that.
wondered,
So we're
because
gonna
I've heard that
need-
myself, and
we're
that
gonna-
is a challenge.
Yeah,
because
we're going to
that's-
need support on that.
There's choice there, but kids that are in quarantine don't have choice. They have to stay home, and now we have a responsibility to them.
Agreed. And we have told people that if you have more than half your class gone, this is more of an elementary thing, you may want to consider live instruction because it might be more efficient.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, the issue becomes like, I have less concern about our high school students. They're pretty adept they know how to access their materials. Whether they choose to or not, it's entirely their own choice. But it's not like they don't know what they need to do. But I do think when you get into middle and elementary school, we do have to do a little bit more to support. And I think we can talk about that at our next meeting.
Okay.
I think we can put that on the agenda, because I think we do need, I think we're going to need board support when it gets to, like you said, Nikki, because we had that already, literally the day after the mask mandate was in place. People wanted to know what virtual options were going to be available to them as they, you know, said they're not sending their kids to school. And that does weigh on the teachers.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Yep. Phil?
Nothing.
Oh, wait, I already
We already went that.
That was the
That was the other-
agenda.
that was the other
All
agenda
right, thank you. Wow.
That's late.
It's late.
It's
Okay,
10
liaison
o'clock.
reports. Is Angie out there anywhere? Anybody get a text from Angie?
I did not.
Liaison reports?
Angie had nothing, right?
Okay. All right. 5 minutes for the press. I don't see anybody from the press. Entertain one final motion at 10:08.
So moved.
Second?
A motion by Teresa and a second by Dan. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
You did 10:08?
We are adjourned.
I voted for that one.
10:08.
I added next.